de cette fibre. Cela englobe chacun des acteurs, depuis les exploitations cotonnières jusqu'aux boutiques et aux détaillants dans le monde entier. Nous sommes donc convaincus que la résolution de l'ONU sur la Journée mondiale du coton contribuera à produire des résultats concrets qui amélioreront le bien-être des populations et leur assureront un avenir plus durable. La résolution appelle à organiser des célébrations annuelles, mais elle sert également à rappeler que l'on peut faire bien davantage, en particulier pour les agriculteurs et les autres acteurs de la filière du coton en Afrique. La résolution réaffirme notamment la pertinence de l'initiative sectorielle en faveur du coton lancée à l'Organisation mondiale du commerce en 2003 par les pays du C4. C'est en effet de l'OMC que toute cette initiative est partie. Nous en sommes très fiers aujourd'hui encore. Les pays du C4, Bénin, Burkina Faso, Mali et Tchad, ont en effet lancé cette initiative dont je rappelle les termes, qui visait à améliorer, je cite, les débouchés du coton et les produits dérivés du coton en provenance des pays les moins avancés, ainsi qu'à réduire sensiblement les effets de distorsion des échanges causés par des mesures abusives adoptées dans le commerce international du coton, et enfin à intensifier le débat sur les facteurs ayant une incidence négative sur le commerce et les marchés du coton. Tous ces objectifs demeure d'une importance cruciale aujourd'hui. Si les réformes qui améliorent le fonctionnement des marchés du coton sont essentielles, c'est aussi le cas de l'aide au développement. La résolution réaffirme l'importance des programmes d'aide au développement et des efforts déployés pour améliorer la capacité de production du coton dans les pays en développement, afin d'encourager les industries de la chaîne d'approvisionnement du coton. En l'espèce, cette résolution rappelle tous les avantages que les pays en développement peuvent retirer des activités de recherche sur mesure, de la formation, du transfert de technologies et des investissements dont ils ont grand besoin. À cet égard, je voudrais rappeler le rôle unique que joue le mécanisme du cadre consultatif du directeur général de l'Organisation mondiale du commerce en faveur du coton. L'acronyme est un peu compliqué, je ne voulais pas, ou alors c'est DGCFMC. Il permet aux bénéficiaires, aux agences de développement et aux organisations internationales concernées de se rencontrer pour présenter et promouvoir les programmes d'aide au développement et partager de précieuses informations qui permettent d'améliorer l'efficacité et la coordination des actions menées. Avant d'ouvrir le débat et nos travaux de ce jour, je voudrais souligner que les secteurs du coton, du textile et du vêtement ont traditionnellement eu une importance cruciale dans le développement industriel, économique et social de nombreux pays qui ont investi dans la chaîne de valeur du coton. Ces filières ont également enregistré des retombées bénéfiques pour d'autres secteurs de leurs économies. Aujourd'hui, le secteur est confronté à de nouveaux défis tels que la pandémie de Covid-19, l'impact du changement climatique et l'évolution des préférences des consommateurs. Dans ce contexte, le secteur du coton a un rôle crucial à jouer pour faire avancer le programme de développement durable à l'horizon 2030 et apporter une contribution concrète à la réalisation de ces objectifs de développement durable. Dans le cadre de nos discussions d'aujourd'hui, des intervenants de haut niveau, des experts de premier plan montreront comment ils envisagent de concrétiser leur vision pour rendre la chaîne de valeur du coton en Afrique plus forte et plus durable. Je tiens donc sans plus attendre à vous remercier tous pour votre participation à l'événement d'aujourd'hui, dont j'espère qu'il sera aussi instructif que constructif pour chacun de nous et pour tous collectivement. Vive le coton, vive la Journée mondiale du coton. Merci à tous et Monsieur le Ministre, je vous passe la parole. Peut-être qu'on peut vous applaudir aussi.
Je disais merci à Monsieur le directeur général adjoint. Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Monsieur le directeur général adjoint de l'OMC, Madame la directrice exécutive de l'ITC, Mesdames et Messieurs les ambassadeurs, Mesdames et Messieurs les acteurs de la chaîne de valeur du coton, Mesdames et Messieurs les représentants des organisations internationales, chers partenaires au développement, Mesdames et Messieurs, c'est avec un grand plaisir que je prends la parole au nom du groupe des 4 pays co-auteurs de l'initiative sectorielle en faveur du coton C4 et plus la Côte d'Ivoire à l'occasion de ce webinaire dans le cadre de la célébration de la Journée mondiale du coton. Le C4, à travers ma personne, se réjouit de l'organisation de ce webinaire et de l'opportunité qui lui est offerte de discuter des opportunités de développement de la chaîne de valeur durable du coton en Afrique. Je profite de cette occasion pour remercier l'Organisation mondiale du commerce, l'OMC, et le Centre du commerce international ITC pour l'organisation du webinaire et de la qualité du thème choisi, qui cadre avec les objectifs de développement des pays du C4 et l'agenda 2063 de l'Union africaine, et ce, avec l'entrée en vigueur de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine, ZLECAf, depuis le 1er janvier 2021. En effet, le programme du coton, lancé en 2017, vise à améliorer la productivité et la compétitivité de la filière coton textile habillement, de manière à favoriser la transformation et la valorisation locale du coton en vue de diversifier ses débouchés, tant sur les marchés de la sous-région que sur les marchés internationaux. Aussi, la 3e édition du Salon international du coton et du textile, SICOT, qui se tiendra les 27 et 28 janvier 2022 à Koudougou, au Burkina Faso, aura pour thème « Transformation locale du coton, quel modèle d'industrialisation pour l'Afrique dans le cadre de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine ». Cela nous réconforte de savoir, à travers le choix de ce thème, que nous sommes en phase avec nos partenaires que sont l'OMC et l'ITC. Ce thème est d'autant plus pertinent dans le contexte marqué par la pandémie de la COVID-19 et qui, plus fort est, rappelle la nécessité de transformation et de valorisation locale du coton, gage d'un développement endogène et de résilience face aux chocs exogènes. Je profite de l'occasion pour témoigner toute la gratitude du C4 à leurs égards pour les initiatives qu'ils mènent pour permettre à nos pays de tirer profit du commerce international du coton. En particulier, je voudrais remercier M. Jean-Marie Pogam, directeur général adjoint, pour tous ses efforts dans la conduite des discussions dans le cadre du mécanisme du cadre consultatif du directeur général en faveur du coton. Ce cadre de concertation, comme vous le rappelez dans votre intervention, favorisant le développement du coton dans les pays producteurs, en particulier le C4, il est de notre devoir de souligner son importance dans la concrétisation de projets de développement dans le coton. Je voudrais également remercier Mme Pamela Cook-Hamilton pour son leadership au sein de l'ITC et pour l'appui que son institution apporte aux pays africains, particulièrement le C4, en vue de leur insertion dans le commerce mondial. Mesdames et messieurs, la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine, entrée en vigueur le 1er janvier 2021, constitue un vaste marché et une opportunité pour le coton africain et ses produits dérivés. Dans la perspective de la relance des économies, il est nécessaire que les pays africains développent leur chaîne de valeur du coton afin de tirer pleinement profit de ce vaste marché continental. Si vous avez l'occasion de visiter les stands, vous verrez que le Burkina Faso est venu avec une diversité donc, de produits issus donc, de la transformation du coton, des produits de qualité, notamment le FEME, le Faso d'Avani, qui est labellisé et protégé à l'OAPI avec une exemption à l'OMPI, qui vous propose donc des produits donc, de qualité, utilisables à la fois donc, comme habillement, mais aussi dans vos différentes maisons, ce qui montre clairement qu'avec le coton, on est capable d'aller très loin, de proposer donc, des choses de qualité aux consommateurs. Pour y parvenir, je voudrais dire que le soutien de l'ensemble des partenaires au développement est nécessaire. Ainsi, je lance un appel solennel aux différents partenaires à continuer à appuyer le C4 dans les aspects de l'assistance technique, en particulier le transfert de technologie. J'invite donc l'ensemble des acteurs de la chaîne de valeur du coton à la réflexion sur le thème du jour afin que les conclusions de ce webinaire puissent nous permettre de nous lancer dans la valorisation du coton africain. Je termine en invitant l'ensemble des acteurs de la chaîne de valeur du coton, les institutions partenaires et l'ensemble de la communauté internationale à participer à la 3e édition du Salon international du coton et du textile SICOT prévu les 27 et 28 janvier 2022 à Koudougou, au Burkina Faso. Plein succès à nos travaux. Je vous remercie.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre. Je voudrais donner la parole à la directrice exécutive adjointe du Centre du commerce international. Dorothy, c'est à vous.
Thank you very much, and a very good afternoon. Honorable Haruna Kabore, Minister of Industry, Commerce and Handicrafts of Burkina Faso, my dear Deputy Director General of the World Trade Organization, Mr. Jean-Marie Pogam, Excellencies, may I simply say, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us today. Today, as you have heard, is a very special day. For the first time, we are celebrating the official United Nations Cotton Day. I join DDG and the Honorable Minister in commending all those who had foresight to propose and support this resolution, because it highlights that cotton is so much more than just a simple crop. In many respects, it is a way of life for large parts of the global community. To celebrate the date, ITC, the World Trade Organization, and the C4 once again have come together in support of this important day. In 2019, we proudly organized the West African C4 Fashion Show, showcasing African designers' unique creativity and talents. This year, we have, together with our partners, organized this webinar, as we have already heard, with an expert panel of speakers to discuss the potential of developing an African value chain from cotton to clothing. More specifically, we will be diving into the vast world of possibilities that investing in sustainable cotton production can bring and contribute towards the achievement of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. As you have already heard, cotton is a global commodity that supports millions of livelihoods around the world, but for which so much more needs to be done to channel a greater part of this value to the producers and farmers, and to continue to push greater value addition at source in the developing countries that produce the vast majority of this white gold. This is why we at ITC have been so supportive of celebrating cotton, because we know that the positive socioeconomic deliverables that can be brought through this particular product. We have worked for decades with cotton producing countries in Africa, and we want to accelerate this work through initiatives such as Route de Coton and our textiles and clothing value chain work that we are doing in many different African countries. World Cotton Day is an opportunity to celebrate our long-standing collaboration and partnership with the C4, and to reaffirm our commitment to work on developing these cotton value chains in Africa. Here at ITC, we work alongside producers to promote decent jobs, environmentally friendly, sustainable, and fairly priced products. We support farmers in Zambia and weavers in Burkina Faso, Benin, Mali, and Zambia. We also coach textiles and clothing manufacturers from North Africa and Madagascar to become more competitive in the export markets. We have witnessed the changes it has made in the lives of citizens in the countries where we are currently working. We have done this together with other partners. At a time when sustainability is critical, it is worth noting that the African cotton generally has a lower environmental footprint than other origins. This is the case as much of the African cotton is rain-fed and thus does not use blue water resources. It also uses less chemicals and fertilizers when compared to its competitors. But this is also an opportunity for us to raise our sustainability boards and see how we can help green the cotton value in all regions. Not only because of the environmental advantages, but because the market is increasingly demanding products that do as little harm as possible to the environment. ITC has a role to play here, and through our Green to Compete hubs across the world, we want to offer advice and resource to cotton producers. Through the initiative on cotton byproducts, established together with the World Trade Organization and anchored in 2018 at the request of the C4, we seek to generate additional revenue streams for least developed countries from production, processing, and trade of cotton. The market of cotton byproducts is also growing in Africa, and these could be an important complementary source of revenue for the cotton sector. Despite their potential though, cotton byproducts have received very little attention in sub-Saharan Africa. This is an untapped opportunity for African countries to further commercialize cotton byproducts. The minister made reference to the African Continental Free Trade Area being an opportunity that could be utilized in this respect and many other respects. We remain very committed to supporting all the countries that we are working with and beyond those that have not yet come on stream. And I want to end by inviting you all to take part in this discussion, because today's discussion will also be what provides input into any of the future action that we take. I do hope that once we are over the pandemic, we will have another opportunity to have a major show, fashion show back here in Geneva, where we can showcase the power and beauty of cotton, as we would also use that opportunity to also showcase many other activities that are linked to this particular initiative. Thank you very much for your attention.
Dear Dorothy, you have been virtually applauded. I don't know if you heard it. Je voudrais vous remercier, vous indiquer que je vais raccompagner Monsieur le ministre hors de la salle et vers l'exposition que nous sommes très fiers d'abriter dans les locaux de l'OMC, et confier la suite de vos travaux aux mains éclairées et expertes de Madame Fall, qui est directrice de l'agriculture et qui supervise en particulier ce programme du Coston, si vous en êtes d'accord, Marianne. Bonne suite de vos travaux.
Good afternoon. and welcome to part one of this joint WTO and ITC webinar in celebration of World Cotton Day 2021. Let me first thank WTO DDG program, ITC Deputy Executive Director Tambo, and His Excellency Minister Kabore of Burkina Faso for their inspiring opening remarks. My name is Mariam Fall. I'm the officer in charge of the Agriculture and Commodities Division here at the WTO, and I will be moderating this first part of our webinar on the current landscape and prospects for further developing cotton and textile value chains in Africa. Part two of the webinar, which is entitled Investing in African Cotton and Investing in Sustainability, will be led by our ITC colleagues. The program of the webinar is available on the WTO's dedicated website for the 2021 edition of World Cotton Day. The UN's official recognition of World Cotton Day, as just mentioned by the previous speakers, is a momentous achievement for, I think, all of us around the room and also on the screens, as we all work very hard to have the proclamation of 7 October as World Cotton Day. This is very important as a recognition, again, as was stated by the DDG program, of all the men and women who derive their livelihoods from cotton production, processing, transformation, and commercialization. This is why the UN resolution on World Cotton Day is certainly a milestone worth celebrating, and we put together this webinar with our colleagues from ITC to do just that, to celebrate this milestone. It's very much an appetizer. We have many interesting topics to discuss, many great panelists with us. The time is short, but we really wanted to have this webinar to mark the occasion and celebrate this UN resolution. We'll have the occasion, I'm certain, to delve deeper into several of these topics, but we really, again, wanted to mark the day and explore this very important topic of cotton value chains. As you may know, and some of you might have been actually here in 2019, the WTO hosted the launch of the first World Cotton Day, following an initiative from the C4. The event was co-organized with our partner organizations, ITC, UNCTAD, UNIDO, FAO, and ICAC, the International Cotton Advisory Committee. So it's a pleasure to welcome you all to this celebratory webinar for World Cotton Day. And we'll start with the first topic of this webinar, which will explore the trade potential and business opportunities which are associated with further regional integration and cotton value addition on the African continent. We will explore how countries can reap enhanced benefits from local cotton production and pursue their social, economic, and development objectives. And we're very fortunate to have with us leading local and international experts who will share their on-the-ground experience and the lessons they have learned from their ongoing work in the cotton value chain. In our discussions, we'll also consider the specific cultural and fashion preferences of consumers on the continent, as well as the business culture and regional specificities. The goal of this session is to better understand the current situation, the challenges and opportunities which are associated with intra-regional trade in cotton goods from the cotton field all the way up to the closing outlet. We'll also discuss the existing trade policy framework and how it can be improved. This relates to infrastructure bottlenecks, investment concerns, prospects for adding value within the sector, again, specifically focusing on the African continent. So we have a distinguished panel of speakers for this first session, and I will now introduce them to you. Our first presentation will be by Mr. Navdeep Sodhi. He's a partner of Guernsey Textile organization in Zurich. He will speak about the African cotton and textile value chains, the contemporary focus and emerging trends. The presentation will set the stage for the remarks by our subsequent 5 panelists. Mr. Xinjiang Yan from the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO. Mr. Mike McHugh from the International Cotton Advisory Committee, ICAC. Ms. Mary Concilia Anchang from the International Forum for Transformation of African Cotton, Textiles and Accessories, FICOTA, Cameroon. Ms. Lisa Berat from Better Cotton Initiative, BCI, and Mr. Francisco Ferreiro dos Santos, President of the Mozambique's Ginners Association. So welcome to all of you, dear panelists, and thank you for taking the time to be with us today. So without further ado, let me give the floor to Mr. Navdeep Sodhi. Navdeep, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Madam Fall. Thank you very much. Thank you, WTO, and thank you, ITC. It is my great honor and privilege to be speaking at this August forum on the World Cotton Day 2021. The topic of the presentation for this panel is African cotton and textile value chain to present its contemporary focus and emerging trends. This presentation is quickly divided into two components. First is we would like to look at the entire value chain from cotton right up to finished products in the markets, and then identify some opportunities, the challenges, and what impact it would have on the entire cotton textile value chain on the continent. The African cotton textile value chain is highly fragmented. If we have to broadly describe it, it is divided into four components. And you will see that the degree of linkages between these four components is today very, very low. So therefore, this obviously presents the first opportunity how to link these four components of the value chain. So upstream, we have cotton production. About 2/3 of Africa's cotton is produced in the Francophone region in West Africa. And there is a potential to not only increase the output, but also to increase the productivity. The second part of the value chain is the textile industry that is starting from spinning, weaving, knitting, and finishing, where cotton is transformed. Now, this industry has been very, very weak in the last 20 years or so. So we can say that this is the weakest link in the value chain, where there are also maximum opportunities to create the linkage with the agro-allied upstream sector. The third component is the import trade. Obviously, there is a consumption of textiles in Africa, but most of this consumption, the demand, is being met by imports. I have no hesitation to say that about 90% of Africa's clothing needs are actually met by imports. And here again lies the opportunity. And the fourth component that we have, which is basically the export processing trade. We know about the garment factories in Kenya, garment factories in Ethiopia, Madagascar, and so on, as well as in the Maghreb countries. But most of these factories are based on the CMT model, which means that they are assembling the fabrics into garments for exports. So there is also an opportunity to integrate them with the local value chains. So this broadly is the aerial view of today's value chain. So let's look at some of the key components of this value chain. Cotton in Africa is produced in these five major basins. The West African basin is the vast and the largest basin, where about 2/3 of Africa's cotton is grown. But if you look at the bars on the right-hand side, you will see the green and the yellow bars. The yellow bar represents the share of cotton produced that is transformed. And in the Francophone Africa, you will find that the yellow bar is insignificant. So out of the 1 million tons of cotton produced, hardly 11,000 tons gets transformed. In Southern Africa, it's a little bit better. In Northern Africa, mainly Egypt, the transformation rate is a little bit better. Nevertheless, at the continental level, bulk of the cotton that is produced is exported as a raw material, which we all know about. Here is some good news and here are some challenges. So when we look at the cotton production and yield in the three major basins, we find that in the West African zone, the cotton production has stabilized about 1.2, 1.3 million tons a year, and the productivity is stable, but there is a scope to improve the yields further. As far as the other two parts of Africa are concerned, they are also stable in terms of their output. But all in all, this is a good news that the cotton production from year to year is either stable or is growing. Another important feature that I would like to capture is sustainability, which was also captured in the by the remarks by the ITC Director General, and that is the production and demand for what is called as the preferred or sustainable cottons, such as BCI, CMIA, and so on, So 5 African countries are participating in this demand or supply of sustainable cottons. And the good news is that the demand for sustainable cottons is growing. According to the information available from Textile Exchange, the share of these preferred cotton is set to increase from 9% in 2014 to 50% a decade later by 2025. And since Africa is participating in this part of the supply to the global cotton textile value chain, this is a very, very important feature or component of the entire value chain. Let me now turn to the textile part, that's the transformation part. And here there is some good news, but also there are opportunities. You will see a lot of numbers here, but I draw your attention to the one in red, where you see the spinning capacity in terms of numbers of ring spindles, because spindle, as you know, is the component on the spinning machines where yarn is produced. So we have seen that after years of decline, the spinning capacity has started to look up. And this is thanks mainly to the investment made by Egyptian government in revamping their spinning industry. Then we look at the fabric forming industry. Here also we see that the number of shuttle-less weaving machines, the investment in these weaving machines, although at a very low base, has started to increase. So for example, in 2020, there were 2,000 additional weaving loom machines added, which is the good news because fabric is being made in Africa. Similarly, when we look at the knitting machines, that is the circular knitting machines, there is an increase, although at a low base. So while these are encouraging news, but it also shows that the potential is still ahead of us. This is an area of concern. The per capita consumption of textiles in Africa, while it is going up as we have the increase in population, we also have younger population which needs modern clothing such as jeans, t-shirts, and so on. But this is being largely met by imports. The total trade in textiles and clothing in Africa in 2020 was $26 billion, of which, as you can see, 90% came from imports. There is also the export of textiles and clothing, which was at about $14 billion, which includes mainly cotton, but also apparels, but apparels is mainly on CMT basis. And as the import deficit is increasing, this is a cause of concern, but it also indicates the size of the opportunity to feed this demand from local supply chains. This picture gives you the trend of exports to 2 major markets, that's the US and Africa for apparels. While this is showing a growing trend, for example, in 2020, there was a 20% increase in exports from sub-Saharan Africa, which is excellent. but it also indicates the potential that this can be spread out. For example, this is mainly coming from 4 countries such as Kenya, Lesotho, Madagascar, and Ethiopia. So other countries also have an opportunity to catch up and take advantage of the market preferences. Similarly, as far as the European Union is concerned, while the trend is stable at about $5.6 billion of exports of clothing, but again, it's mainly originating from 2 Maghreb countries, that's Tunisia and Morocco. So again, an opportunity for other African countries to profit from this opportunity. So what are broadly the opportunities and some initiatives that are going around and which we need to take note of? The first important opportunity is that our industry at the global level is undergoing restructuring. As a result of the pandemic, this restructuring phase has been accelerated, and therefore it is leading to the consolidation of the industry and also diversification of the industry outside of major countries such as China. So this presents the biggest opportunity for buyers to change their sourcing strategy to source from other countries. In terms of advantages, Africa is endowed with raw materials. It has a large labor pool, and there's a vast amount of land and water available, which can be utilized for production of textile, which needs all these resources to be pooled together. In terms of market access, apart from the traditional preferred market access to the OECD markets, we now also have the African Continental Free Trade Area, which also presents the domestic integration. Then there are global initiatives such as China's Belt and Road initiatives, then other agencies such as WTO, ITC, IFC, GIZ. All these multilateral and development organizations are putting a lot of weightage to support initiatives to expand the value chain. And last but not the least, development of the cotton textile industry in Africa will directly address several sustainable development goals, such as empowerment of women, by removal of reduction of poverty, by providing decent jobs, and so on and so forth. So what are the action areas that we need? So we have tried to consolidate this into 5 key buckets of action areas, both for the public, that's the policy, as well as the private sector. The first important task for the governments and the public sector is to create a vision and a roadmap for the textile and clothing industry. Second is to create the infrastructural support in terms of providing an enabling environment for the industry and reducing the cost of doing the business. In terms of FDI, this is needed because FDI will bring the market, it will bring the skill part, and it will also bring the investment. In terms of market access, there is already an opportunity available. So it's up to African textile industry to take advantage of that. In terms of raw materials, the key action areas that we foresee is to sustain the smallholder cotton farming. And in countries where there is a weak link in terms of supply of certified seeds, to promote that, because we have seen that the yields or the productivity per hectare in Africa is still about 50 to 60% only of the global productivity level. So there is clearly a policy actions required here. And lastly, in terms of capacity building, there is a need to improve the skills and at the firm level as well as at the industry level in order to ensure that the human capital can be created to realize those opportunities. Madam Chair, I thank you very much for this opportunity, and I would like to now leave the panel open for questions and for contribution from other panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sodi, for this very insightful and I must say very comprehensive overview of the current situation in terms of the African cotton value chain. And your presentation really sets the scene quite well for now the intervention of our panelists. I must say that one of the takeaways is that it's quite startling to know that 90% of Africa's cotton needs are actually met by imports. This is really quite a startling reality. But again, thank you for all the information you've provided. In light of the time constraints that we have, I'll move straight to the panelists. And should we have time at the end of the interventions of the 5 panelists, we'll come back with follow-up questions as needed. So with this background in mind, it's time now to hear from our panelists. I will start with Jing Zhang from UNIDO. Could you please share with us some of UNIDO's success stories and tell us more about your plans for supporting the cotton value chain during the 3rd industrial development decade for Africa? Jing Zhang, you have the floor. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Amelia, Mr. Ford, for your question, and distinguished guests. Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. First of all, I would thank the WTO for the invitation so that we can celebrate the World Cotton Day 2021 together in this event. I'm also very happy to take the opportunity to share UNIDO's interventions and assistance to the cotton, textile, and garment sectors in Africa, particularly in the context of the global initiative IDD3, which is the 3rd industrial development decade for Africa. IDD3 was proclaimed by the UNGA in July 2016 and is politically a very important initiative co-led by the African Union, NAPAD, ECA, and UNIDO. UNIDO is responsible for the technical aspects of IDD3. IDD3 represents the latest initiative in favor of Africa's industrialization after the IDD1 and IDD2, which is the first decade and the second decade implemented in 1980s and 1990s, respectively. So the efforts of IDD3 has focused on mobilizing and consolidating the political support to IDD3. Now I think we are entering the phase of promoting joint initiatives, especially select flagship initiatives. So the joint IDD3 roadmap has been developed to act as a framework for the development and implementation of these joint initiatives. It has institutionalized the IDD3 focal points in 28 UN agencies and other institutions. And talking about the Africa continent, I think Africa is a rising star of the global textile and clothing production due to the progressive trade reforms, tax incentives, and sufficient labor, as mentioned in the previous presentation. Particularly before the pandemic, Africa fashion export generated a revenue of $4.6 billion a year, which I think is more than the annual flow of the aid into Africa from any European donor. Africa has an important toehold in the global fashion industry that in 2019 was worth like $2.5 trillion and employed 75 million people. So the fashion industry can really play an important role in Africa's social and economic progress. Several countries are already heavily dependent on the sector that can generate up to 60% of national export revenue and as much as 30% of gross domestic product GDP. UNIDO has worked in Africa for a long time and accumulated extensive experience in different dimensions of the textile and apparel value chain, particularly on cotton. Cotton has been one of the priority sectors of the UNIDO intervention within the framework of different projects starting the later of 1990s. I would like to share with several cases here. One is the West Africa Quality Program, which founded by the European Union and implemented by UNIDO in 3 different time frames, provide the technical support to the West African countries in terms of quality infrastructure development, and it fostered the competitiveness of the enterprise and facilitates regional and international trade and ensure a better protection of West Africa consumers. Another program is industry upgrading and restructuring program in the West Africa. It supports 11 enterprise operating the cotton seed crush value chain and 5 enterprise operating the cotton textile value chain in West Africa. It was to increase and upgrade the quality and quantity of the product for those enterprise and enhance their competitiveness. Some ongoing projects from UNIDO side, I think one is support to the business friendly and inclusively national and regional policy and strengthening the productivity capacities and value chain, which are funded by the 11th European Development Fund through the ACP private sector development facilities and programs. Here, UNIDO is responsible for the meso level programs, and we will leverage the intermediate organization and business memberships networks, including the investment promotion institutions and business support programs, marketing, monitoring, and partnerships. The cotton and fashion value chain are also listed among the priority value chain for the sub-Saharan Africa countries, especially for those micro-level interventions. Another project we are working on is the sustainable textile investment and operation in Ethiopia, which is to promote the ESG performance improvement for the local textile enterprise and upgrading the capacity and the competitiveness of the national regulatory body and to create easy information access platform for those international buyers and manufacturers. Another ongoing project is the Egyptian cotton project. I think with the support of the Ministry of Agriculture and Land Reclamation of Egypt and the Ministry of Moti of Italy. And the Egypt cotton promotes the organic cotton and non-contaminated cotton and is a local value. So UNIDO's approach here is focused on the sustainable value chain development of the cotton, textile, and government from farmer to the closet. It will foster the B2B linkages and across the Africa and localize the manufacturing process as much as possible. It will aim to provide a technical cooperation on product development to enhance the competitiveness and to embrace the digital tools and strengthen the different cooperation through the value chain in different countries and the regions. It is support to create a job opportunity through the value chain from farmer side and to the manufacturer employee, to improve the gender equality and to increase awareness of environmental protection, i.e. the chemical reduction, waste disposal management, and energy saving, etc. And eventually to build up the sustainability of the cotton value chain in Africa through the improvement on the traceability and the transparency. For future, UNIDO is developing the joining efforts and partnerships with the C4 countries and the ITC in the cotton load program is to improve the quality in the cotton value chain and support the textile and the clothing sector and promote the investment and transfer expertise and technology in C4 countries. So we intend to do it in the large context of the IDDA3, which has been championed by 8 Africa presidents. It will provide a platform for the development and the implementation of joint interventions for economic diversification and value addition, foster business partnerships, and bringing the traditional and innovative financing and for the industrialization. So I think the cooperation on the cotton fits very well with IDDA3 aspirations, and we need to support and promote a flagship IDDA3 initiative on cotton. Thank you. Give back the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Xinjiang. Again, that was a very insightful presentation, and we're very happy to hear the various opportunities for capacity building that UNIDO has been fostering. Particularly, actually, I noted the technology transfer initiative that you're working on with ITC, which is very much in line with the joint initiative on cotton byproducts that our 3 organizations have launched at the request of the C4, and technology transfer is really at the center of byproducts and transformation. Again, should we have time at the end of this first part, we'll revert with questions from the floor or from participants. But for now, I would like to move on to our next panelist, please. So this will be addressed to Mike. Good morning, Mike. We know that the International Cotton Advisory Committee, ICAC, has long been active in examining and understanding cotton production, yields, exports, both globally, but also in Africa. We also know that you have created a large network within the region. So could you please tell us more about the hurdles and the bottlenecks impeding cotton trade and transformation on the continent, and share with us how you think those hurdles can be overcome?
Thank you, Miriam.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Miriam. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. So textile manufacturing is not new to Africa. It's been there for more than 1,000 years. Kankan Musa, the 9th Mansa of the Mali Empire, made a pilgrimage to Mecca in the 1300s, and it was noted then that he and his group were wearing cotton clothing that had gold threads woven through it. So even the early textile manufacturers in Africa had some style. But what happened between then and now? Transforming cotton into finished goods generates a lot more revenue than exporting raw fiber does. But there's been very little textile processing infrastructure built in Africa. Total world textiles trade is about $800 billion a year, but Africa only accounts for about 14 billion of it. That's less than 2%. And there are 2 primary reasons for that. The first is that African countries, for much of their histories, were colonized by others. And historically, colonizing countries were more interested in extracting resources from their colonies than they were in investing in local infrastructure. So the colonizers exported raw cotton fiber from Africa back to their own countries to be transformed. And thus they kept the employment and all of the other economic benefits in the homeland, and not so much in the places where the cotton actually came from. And that was not unique to cotton. The same thing happened with other resources like cocoa and ground nuts and palm oil. And the second reason is, even after the colonizers left, cotton production in most African countries was controlled by state-run monopolies, which, much like colonizers, are not known for their eagerness to spend and invest. They had no competition, so they didn't need to get better or be more efficient or develop new industries. Now, why would they risk their money creating new infrastructure and training a new workforce when they could just coast and continue to make money anyway? So fortunately, many African governments have broken up those monopolies. And that's important because it's what makes outside investment possible. But there are still problems in Africa, most notably the fact that much of the developed world dumps its secondhand clothing into Africa. And that clothing on the markets is so cheap that it kills demand for locally produced textiles. They simply can't compete with a price point of secondhand clothing. So I have spent my couple of minutes today talking about depressing things like colonization and monopolies, but I promise that the The next panelist will do better. I'm just setting the stage, and she will talk about much more positive and exciting things for Africa than I did. So I see the floor.
Thank you, Mike. No, that wasn't depressing at all. It was actually quite instructive. So thank you for sharing that information. And I actually learned something about Mali having a textile industry that long ago. So thank you for that brief introduction, but very insightful introduction to Mary's segment. So Mary, I would like to then turn to you, please. And if you could please tell us more about the International Forum for Transformation of African Cotton Textiles and Accessories, the FICOTA project, which I believe is based in Cameroon. I think we would all like to know more about its history, its mission, and its contribution to social transformation and achievements to date. I would also welcome your thoughts on the potential for African cotton market transformation from the perspective of small, medium designers and businesses. So, and of course, not forgetting the importance and the role of women in this process. So with that, Mary, if you're connected, would like to give you the floor. Thank you.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for this opportunity as we celebrate the World Cotton Day. In fact, there is good news because I was even able to attend the first edition of the World Cotton Day launch in Geneva, which shows the determination coming from Africa to make Africa part of the venture and make Africa part of the cotton industry in the transformation phase. Where do we come from with FICOTA? First of all, FICOTA means International Forum for the Production and Transformation of African Cotton into Textiles and Accessories. We started off in 2017, whereby the African Chamber of Trade and Commerce, which is a new organization, non-for-profit, with African think tank and Friends of Africa, who thought that it was about time that we look into how we define and work with the synergies that are in place to develop Africa's economy with the AU 2063 agenda, with all the emerging agendas for African continents, with the World Bank efforts and all the development partner efforts to see how there is sustainability in the growth of African economies through local transformation. So we organized the African Economic Day. This day was a day where we had to do with the topic was production transformation and competitivity in the local productions in the agro industry and in the crop and animal industry. Most of the panelists were speaking on perishable goods, food stuff like maize, plantains, transformation, and how we had this speaker who had to talk on the cotton industry, the cotton farming, because it's a day of sharing, networking with the government and development partners and businesses, where we meet to be able to brainstorm on what is happening in the continent, what is happening in the business sector, what can we do, where are the overlappings taking place, why is the private sector slow, and why are we still complaining when we should be doing better with Africa's potential. So on this day, we came up with the resolutions after listening to the panelists who spoke on the on cotton and sharing the knowledge on the cotton industry. We realized that there was a lot of sustainability and potential in the cotton plant. And so we saw that if we have to build our synergy towards a sector oriented, because the African Chamber of Trade and Commerce has a business model, which is a sector oriented bottom-top business model approach. We say so because we think that if we are not working from the bottom to build the sustainability, to guarantee the quantities and the quality, we are not able to meet the standards when it comes to transformation of the product and actually reaching out in terms of norms and standards within the world and the world markets. So we have to be competitive and we have to meet the standards that are there in the world. So we discovered that if we have to build on the cotton value chain, there is a lot that can be done, considering that there was weakness in the efforts that have been made over decades to see the cotton textile plant transformed within Africa into clothing and accessories. We observed that the entrepreneurs who were in this industry, all the actors were complaining of shortage of material, shortage of access to raw material, shortage of access to equipment, shortage of access to capital, and such shortage of access to training in skills and all of that. Then we said, in view of the vulnerability of the sector, I think we need to craft a tool that becomes a product in the CEMAC regions, French-speaking Africa, with the potential of the cotton, the quantities of cotton that's produced from this section, from this part of the world. We should be more determined in the efforts that we make to see that cotton becomes transformed locally, create jobs and opportunities for Africans, youth and women. As a female, you can definitely understand that it was a very challenging experience for me, because it was like, how do you come to talk about cotton and the white gold and Africa? What are you talking about? But we believe that there is potential and there's opportunity. As long as there is the consumer market, as long as there is the opportunity to train many more for more job markets, we cannot avoid the question. So FICOTA was a platform that was created with the project to see how we work together in synergy with government, development partners, and businesses into the cotton industry to grow cotton production from the farm to the market. So in this approach, we look into all the segments of the process from the farm to the market. Where do we connect? What are the overlappings? What are the needs? It became a very attractive opportunity because I was also invited to the SICOT Salon International du Coton in Burkina Faso in 2018, where I was a contributor. The African Chamber had an opportunity to share with the OEF and most of the speakers, GIZ, ICAC, and those who came for the event. Further to that, we now organize the first ever edition of FICOTA that held in Cameroon, in the Kribi region, in the Kribi city, a seaside city, which happens to be in the Gulf of the Guinea and hosts one of the major key seaports in the Gulf of the Guinea, leading to all international routes. So that is what motivates us to believe that with the facilities that government has given us, which is the industrial free trade zone in the Kribi Deep Seaport City, we are trial the resources in terms of who does what in the industry, the farmers, the trainers, the engineers, the agro-engineers, the textile industry experts, the equipment experts, the fashion and the brand industries. We are able to come together. We should be able to come together to determine the way forward for African transformation of African cotton, for to develop the African textile value chain. That's how it came about. That's how we came about creating FICOTA. The first edition was a good success because we had OEF as a partner. We had the Ministry of Industry and the Ministry of Commerce in Cameroon that were co-parents of the event. And it was inaugurated and the panelists were very well edifying. And we came off of that edition with the resolutions. And those resolutions were, how do we structure the lapses? How do we structure the ecosystem in the cotton textile transformation industry for better opportunities for Africans in the business, for women and for children in the, for women and for youth in the industry, in view of the many idling unemployed youths in Africa.
Thank you so much, Mary. Again, as I said, this is really very much an appetizer activity because we have so many interesting panelists and so many topics to cover. And unfortunately, we're short on time, but I really want to congratulate you on this FICOTA project and its noble objectives. I've noted local transformation, do better with African potential. I think this is really remarkable and we congratulate you on this. I've also noted the top hurdles that you've mentioned, raw material, the lack of raw material. And I think we've heard this from other people also, not at this panel, but previously, capital, equipment, training. So I'm sure all of the partners that are listening into this webinar are also taking good note. And I will thank you and move on to the next speaker. So Lisa, I will now turn to you, please. Among its members, the Better Cotton Initiative, BCI, includes producers, traders, spinners, and ginners, as well as globally recognized brands and retailers, and the textile industry at large. Could you please share with us the work that BCI has been doing in Africa and your thoughts on how to join the dots in the cotton to clothing value chain on the continent? What is needed and how can examples from other parts of the world help shape the textile industry in Africa? With that, I give you the floor. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chairman and moderator for the introduction. Just to introduce, as you also heard from Dorothy Tembo in her introduction, at that sustainable cotton and the link to the for the strategic outlook for Africa. The Better Cotton Standard System is a holistic approach to sustainable cotton production, which covers all three pillars of sustainability, environmental, social, and economic gains for farmers. Each of the elements, from the principles and criteria to the monitoring mechanisms, which show results and impact, work together to support Better Cotton Standard System and the credibility of Better Cotton and BCI. The whole Better Cotton system is designed to ensure the exchange of good practices and to encourage. Sorry, can you hear me?
Sorry, Lisa, may I stop you? Mary, could you turn off your mic, please? Mary? Marie, si vous pouvez juste éteindre votre micro, s'il vous plaît. Okay, Lisa, I'm sorry, if you can sit, please. Lisa, please.
Okay, sure. Thank you. So what the system of the Better is the exchange of good practices and to encourage the scaling up of collective action in the field to establish sustainable mainstream commodity. I must point out that to achieve the goals of the Better Cotton Initiative, we work with valued partners in the field. For example, our partner in Mozambique, SAN-JFS, represented by Francisco, who will be speaking on the panel today, for which we are much appreciative of. As a general introduction,
Lisa, I'm sorry. I mean,
BCI has
we're having
principles.
We're having technical issues. I'm very sorry. Is it possible perhaps to just switch off your video and just keep the mic on because you're breaking off? If you can just maybe switch off the video.
Sure. Sure.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Should we try this? Is that better?
We hear you so far. Yes, so far so good. Please proceed.
We work with 7 principles, and I'll just do a brief introduction on these. Crop protection, water, we look at biodiversity, soil health elements, fiber quality, decent work, and management systems. Is this connection all right?
I would say it's 50%. In any case, Lisa, we actually probably will ask if you can share your presentation with us, and we'll pass it on to those connected to the webinar, if that's okay with you. Connection is really not ideal. We hear basically 1 out of 2 words. Yes, we can upload your presentation on the website if that's okay with you.
Okay. Well, so are you wanting me to stop?
Yeah, I'm sorry. We really are basically getting 1 out of 2 or 3 words at best. So perhaps it's best, at least let me move on to the next panelist. We'll try you again and see if the connection is a bit better in a few minutes, if that's okay with you, Lisa.
Okay, sure. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. It's the realities that we all have to deal with now in this virtual world. So we'll move on to the last panelist for this first part of the webinar. So Francisco, welcome. You run a cotton production business and you head the Mozambique Ginners Association. And we would be interested to find out how current policies help to connect different cotton to clothing stakeholders and contribute to the sustainability of the local and regional processing industry. We will also be very happy to hear your thoughts about the investment and financing that local entrepreneurs need to increase their share of the final product which is consumed in Africa. So basically, in other words, how can cotton produced in Africa become clothing made in Africa? With that, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mariem. Can you please just confirm if you are listening well?
We hear you well and we see you well. So far, so good. Please proceed.
Good, that's good. So first of all, thanks WTO and ITC for the invitation, and I'm very honored to be here and to present some brief words from Mozambique, which maybe for some of you can be a very exotic country. So just in a nutshell, and before your question, let me just say that Mozambique is part of Southeast Africa. We are part of SADC region. We are still one of the lowest income countries in the world, but with great potential ahead. We are very old in cotton. We have been producing cotton for a long time, but we are still very small in terms of volume. So I'd say almost insignificant in terms of the global trade. In any case, to Mozambique country, it's really important. Mozambique has 70% of its population in the rural areas, basically living from agriculture in self-subsistence. And basically, cotton is really a crop that reaches very far. We basically operate in small-scale farming setup. We assist more or less about 200,000 farmers. To put this in perspective, that's more or less equivalent to the population of a city like Geneva, assuming that everyone would grow cotton, including children. And we are reaching about 1 million people. Yes, in Mozambique, we also have big families, so about 5 people per household. The farmlands, it's, just on cotton, it's about 180,000 hectares. To get another reference, using another European city, that's more or less 2 times the size of a city like Berlin, assuming that all the land will be cultivated with cotton. And of course, every cotton farmer, before doing cotton, he also does food crops. So basically, we are talking about 4 times the size of Berlin just in agriculture. So basically, we reach 4% of the total farmers in the country, and we represent about 10% of the agriculture exports of the country. So this means that any action, any improvement that we can bring to our value chain, particularly in partnership with stakeholders like BCI, can really make a difference. And that basically has been our focus. By the way, Mozambique has been the first country, I believe, integrating the better cotton principles into the regulation of cotton. So going back to your question, Mariem, I'm not, as you know, I'm not coming from the textile. I'm not an expert on that, but I'm an entrepreneur, and I'll just give you the way we in Mozambique see it. And I'm very honored and proud to see that some African countries have been able to really grasp this kind of investment for the textile. An introduction note, I think it's relevant to probably assume that we are not just talking about creating the industry in Africa. We are probably talking about changing it from Asia to Africa because the market is not elastic. This means that not only the conditions in our countries and in Mozambique need to be great, but they need to be better than what the Asian markets are offering. So this is basically true and hard competition that we need to assume in a very proactive approach. And why? Because the opportunity is there. Mr. Sodi has presented it quite clearly, but I could probably tell you about our case just from a rough guess. Probably we just from going from lint exports to an export of t-shirts or jeans, we could multiply our export value by 10 times. This means that our $50 million of exports in Mozambique could become, in a medium term, in a short, medium term to $500 million exports. And this would mean doubling the national exports, agriculture exports of Mozambique that are currently at 500 million. And this is only about the lint itself, the cotton itself, but we cannot forget that cotton is only about the fiber. It's only about 40% of what we harvest. And so we have basically 50 to 55% of grain and seeds that can and should be used to produce oils that the region imports, but also the cakes that we should use for our cattle, and also produce soaps, and also producing energy via the biomass. The cotton stalks is quite important to do that. So probably cotton in Mozambique and in the region is the crop with the highest capacity to generate value and employment in the short term. And that's why it is so important to everyone. And that's why it's so protected in the other major countries in the world. And basically it is in the same environment that we need to play in. So again, what is then required to make this happen in Mozambique and other countries? From all the common sense things that the industry needs to appear and thrive, when we talk to people from the industry, let's say a company in Asia, and when we try to attract him to invest in Mozambique, there are three things that the guys normally ask. First is taxation regime. Second is energy quality and price. And third, if we have a trading agreement with the key export markets. And we need to have this in place, and we need to make sure that our governments and development partners really understand that without a proper framework on these three aspects, it will be very difficult, if not impossible, to bring the kind of investment that this industry requires. And remember that we need to benchmark with Asia, which has been very successful and aggressive in creating conditions for this investment to establish. So, of course, then we need to pitch our case aggressively in forums like this, but it's basically the work that we need to do. I would do just a very brief comment to finalize in 1 or 2 minutes on the traceability aspects, which has been probably one of the most important issues in discussion in the markets. And I would like just to state, being a farmer, a ginner, that the conversation nowadays has been mostly focused in the textile industry itself, which is understandable because they are the first layer, getting the pressure from the retailers that get the pressure from the consumers that want to have assurance of the social and environmental impact of the final goods. But I mean, a fair t-shirt, a fair cloth, a fair yarn will only be fair if our seed cotton, if our lint, if our farmers are also fair. And this is very challenging to ensure in places like in our countries, in Africa, particularly in Mozambique. It is important to state that most of our farmers in Mozambique don't even have identity cards. And so basically, to have a traceability system that really works, we need to ensure first that we have biometric identities, and we have been able to do this in Mozambique. Secondly, we need to ensure that we are able to have georeferencing, which in Mozambique we also were able to do. Then we need to have digital technology that will enable us to register each transaction, linking that kilogram of cotton to a face and to a plot. Of course, afterwards, we need to ensure that we have some kinds of marking technology in order to link and close the entire system. We need to then show that that particular fiber is in fact linked to that transaction, which is registered as I referred. Lastly, the current technologies nowadays to mark cotton, there are some companies already testing and trialing that, say that it can cost around 10 to 50 cents per pound, which might not seem much in a value of the final garments, in the value of a t-shirt, but it really represents about 10 to 50% of the sale of a ginner. So it's really a lot of money. If we multiply these 10 cents times the 25 million tons of cotton that the world produces and eventually sells, we are talking about an investment of $5 billion just to physically mark the cotton, and that process needs to start at the farm. So this is really a challenge. Currently, the industry is not ready to deliver what the end consumer wants, and we need to be very clear around that. We should not hide ourselves from that challenge, and we should focus in creating the necessary resources in order to achieve that. So that's what we have been trying to do in Mozambique in our very humbled position that we have in this fantastic cotton. So I wish you all a fantastic day, and Mariam, over to you.
Obrigada, Francisco. That was very, very interesting. A great case story in terms of the situation in Mozambique. And I'm sure all of the other participating countries which are producing cotton, but also the donors and partners have taken good note and have listened carefully to all the very useful examples you've shared about the situation in Mozambique. I'm looking at the time, and we were supposed to close already 10 minutes ago. And since we have a very interesting part 2 waiting for us, I would like to perhaps bring this first part to a close. Again, as I say, this is very much an appetizer because we've had some great panelists and very interesting topics which deserve greater time and discussion. So we hope to be able to organize that on the margins of one of our WTO cotton meetings and invite you all again to come. So many thanks to all of our speakers, to Mr. Sodi of Guernsey, to Xinjiang of UNIDO, Mike from ICAC, Mary from FICOTA. Lisa, sorry, but we did get at least 30% of what you were saying from BCI, and Francesco from the Juniors Association of Mozambique. It was great having you on this panel. And thank you for sharing your insights, experiences, and assessments from the ground. Clearly, there is a huge amount of effort which is being made to add value in the cotton to clothing value chain in Africa. We hope that there will be other activities aimed at exploring this topic and which will help shape the future of trade policy framework. In this regard, I'd like to remind you, as the DG program has mentioned, we have the DGCFMC, which hosts meetings twice a year here in Geneva, the WTO, and we hope to see many of you, all of you, at those meetings to discuss these topics. The WTO helps to give greater visibility to the needs in the region in general, in Africa in general, but also as pointed by the C4. And you may know, that the C4 has asked for partners conference to be organized on the margins of MC12. And this will be to bring together development agencies, financial institutions, and beneficiaries to identify how technical and financial resources can help respond to project proposal and strengthen cotton value chain. So we will communicate further on that partners conference once we have the logistics confirmed from our side. So with this, I would like to thank you all for your participation and invite our ITC colleague, Mr. Matthias Napper, to now take over and to continue the webinar with the second part, which is entitled Investing in African Cotton Means Investing in Sustainability. Thank you all, and vive le coton et sa chaîne de valeur. Matthias, over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Mariam, and welcome everybody for the second part. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Mariam already said, we are looking into investing into Africa, and cotton means investing in sustainability. And we try to build, well, we're building on what has been said in the first part. And in the second part, we look into cotton fiber value addition in Africa from 2 specific angles, and both angles were mentioned already. And the first angle is the private sector angle, and all our panelists come from the private sector except for one. And we look into the different parts of the value chain. So we start by looking into cotton production and ginning, and here we We'll have Usman Kanwa from the International Cotton Advisory Committee looking into the production part of cotton in Africa, but also from a specific angle, the angle of sustainability, which we heard several times already today. We'll also have, this will look into Africa as a whole. And secondly, at the production part, we will then look into a specific example from South Africa and Southern Africa, done by Tanya Okon from Cotton South Africa. We will then move into textiles and clothing manufacturing and the potential, something that Nadib has been explained is a missing link somehow. But we have certain examples, and we will look first into the industrial manufacturing and the demand for cotton. And here we'll have Jazz Betty, a well-known entrepreneur from Africa, vertically integrated, using African cotton and producing along the entire value chain until the final shirt, and exports this to major markets. So we'll look into industrial manufacturing and how it could be scaled up, in his view, in Africa. So something that Nadib has been highlighting as a major constraint right now. But then there's also the other angle of artisanal fiber value addition, because there is a big artisanal industry, call it industry or sector, in Africa that also uses a lot of cotton and can scale up. And this will be looked at by Anna Moja, who runs an NGO, who is an activist from West Africa, from Mali, and who supports a lot environmental friendly transformation of cotton in West Africa. And then finally, we look at also the markets. We have heard about the markets for products made out of African cotton that are actually produced along the value chain in Africa. And we look into the market perspective within Africa, within the framework of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So we have Natasha Ambrosio from Mr. Price Group with us, talking about their demand for cotton made in Africa out of African cotton. As you know, Mr. Price Group operates in 8 African countries as a big retailer on the continent. And then we look into the market demand from an export perspective, or from the demand from an importing country, the most important destination of African garments right now, the US. And I'm glad that we have with us Julia Juice. She is the president of the US Fashion Industry Association. And she tells us, she will tell us a little bit about how brands and retailers see AGOA and the future, and how an integrated industry is important for US buyers. So that's a little bit the structure and the first perspective. And the second perspective everybody looks into in the second part of the webinar is environmental sustainability. And that's a little bit what has been said already and what the title suggests. Investing in African cotton means investing in sustainability. And just looking at cotton production and generally, what was mentioned by Dorothy Tembo, the Deputy Executive Director of ITC, African cotton in principle has a more favorable environmental footprint than many other destinations. That's because it's rain-fed, and it's because the chemical and fertilizer usage is generally lower than elsewhere. And in this regard, there was also a study done lately by Cotton Made in Africa, who compared sub-Saharan African countries they buy from with the global average, and basically they confirmed what I've just been saying, and hopefully what we're also hearing a little bit from our colleague from ICAC later on. And overall, we believe that this is an aspect that has not really been used very substantially in promoting African cotton and in promoting value addition in cotton. It gives a really good basis to build an industry on top that is then also adhering to the SDGs and social and environmental sustainability criteria. So all the panelists look at these 2 aspects in their presentations. we structured the way of this second part that everybody of the panelists has about 10 minutes time to make a presentation, either in the form of a PowerPoint presentation or also in the form of just talking. We had a certain logic in the interventions. Unfortunately, since we have a little delay, this logic is breaking a little bit down because we will have to bring some of the panelists earlier than is foreseen in the value chain, say it. And this is because he is also now attending the UNCTAD conference in Barbados and has other speaking obligations a little later. So instead of now moving into cotton production, let us jump into industrial manufacturing first. And I would like to invite Jasminder Bedi to share with us. No, Jasminder Bedi has been the chairman of the International Textile Federation. He has been the chairman of the African Cotton Textile Industry Federation. So he's well known. He has his own companies in Kenya and Uganda, and he's virtually integrated. So just great that we have you with us. Can you share a little insight of how you operate and how you think it could be scaled up in Africa? Over to you, Jess.
Thank you very much, Matthias, and good morning and good afternoon to all the panelists and all the delegates, wherever you are. And thank you so much for accommodating me, because I have another session in the next 20 minutes that I'm speaking at here in Barbados. But by and large, I think a lot of good things have been said today, especially with the presentations that have been made, that African cotton is about 6% of the world's cotton production. 70% of that cotton is exported from the continent, and there's no or very little value addition done on the continent of Africa. And most of that cotton makes its way into Asia, into Indonesia, Bangladesh, Vietnam. And to me, that's the serious opportunity that we have at our doorstep, that we as manufacturers or players in the industries are not managing. Of course, a big chunk of the cotton that is grown. Sorry, can you hear me? Of course,
yes, we can hear you. We hear you.
Thank you. Of course, a big chunk of the cotton that's grown on the continent of Africa is largely rain-fed cotton. As earlier said, it's conventional cotton, very little GM cotton, and very little cotton that can be called the BT cotton. To me, that is a serious opportunity. That itself is an opportunity, because there is a difference. And this cotton is different to the rest of the world. And we should market it differently, and we should sell it differently, so that the consumer is very well aware that this is not large-scale commercial farming, it's smallholder farming. And I guess a lot of this cotton is grown, 70% of it in the West African countries. So there's a serious opportunity. Obviously, the opportunity lies for production in Africa and sales into the US under AGOA in most of the sub-Saharan African countries who have this trade preference program at their doorstep. Similarly, we have the EPA with Europe, that gives us duty-free market access to Europe, duty-free market access to the US. And with a continental free trade agreement, that's 1.2 billion people on the continent of Africa. It's duty-free market access within the continent. Some of the regional economic blocks are already working. That's in the East African Community, under SADC, under COMESA. And now the building blocks are being put together into a continental free trade agreement, which shows the huge opportunity at our doorstep. So the presentation that I'm making is that, you know what, we need to change our mindset. We need to look at our own raw material. We need to add value. There's a serious scope of scaling up the business, and there's a serious scope of actually creating the jobs that are required so much on this continent. And what we've done in our own factory in Uganda, we are probably the only ones in the world that are actually running a field to fashion model. We have 16,000 smallholder farmers who are contracted doing cotton production for us. That is ginned into cotton lint. It comes into the factory in Kampala, where we're actually spinning, knitting, fabric manufacture, dyeing, finishing, and making garments and selling T-shirts to Europe and to the US. We're selling to large brands in Germany like the Otto Group, which owns brands like Bon Prix. We're selling to Jack & Jones, which is the bestseller group. And there's serious opportunity in just doing value addition. And to give you a small example, Uganda exports about $50 million of raw cotton. And if it just makes a simple T-shirt and sells a simple T-shirt, that the needle moves from $50 million to $750 million. I mean, it's a game changer for a small country like Uganda. It becomes the single largest export out of Uganda. Currently, their largest export is coffee, which is about $400 million. This is almost double that by just doing a value addition. So that's what we are aspiring to do, and that's what we are doing in Uganda. In Kenya, we're running a different value chain, which is mainly on the synthetic space, polyesters, and lots of exports to the US in the polyesters. But the reason we're doing that is that the Kenyan cost of doing business is slightly higher. So we're doing a high tariff business in Kenya and a lower tariff business in Uganda. The duty on cotton piece goods in the US is about 16%, and on polyester is about 32%. So I think horses for courses, and we really need to map out and look at the trade preference programs out there, and how can we benefit and run a profitable business looking at the trade preference programs that we have and the duty-free, quota-free market access that we have. So I know my presentation is a bit abrupt, but I've got a 2-minute video which I would like you to play so that you can actually see what we're doing. And maybe this can inspire many other people to actually run a similar value chain. Thank you very much, Matthias.
Just seeing the video, but it's muted. We're trying again, Jasminda, I think, to show the video.
I think it's a problem with the voice, but basically these are the plantations in Western Uganda, and it's in a town called Kasese. You can see the Rwenzori Mountains at the back. We have actually got a brand ambassador. The identity cotton that we are doing is cotton made in Africa. Laura Chaplin is the brand ambassador for CMIA. And so we're trying to tell the consumer that there is a difference in the cotton, and it's not a straightforward cotton that you would use. So the cotton, we have a little school that we've built there. These are mothers who leave their kids in school and go and pick cotton in the farms. And we're just actually educating the consumer in Europe and US, saying that if you can use CMIA as a brand, it's a good thing. This is the ginnery in Kasese. This is the aerial view of the ginnery. This is where the cotton comes in, and it's ginned into lint cotton. This actually then moves into the factory, which will be the next slide. Coming up soon. Yeah, so this is the lint cotton that makes its way to Kampala. This is a factory in Kampala where we're actually spinning. This is the spinning plant. And then, as you can see here, and then this is the fabric that is now made, knitted. It's then dyed and garmented and sold mainly to Europe and US. So it's a fully integrated factory that shows the entire value chain from field to fashion, and a value chain that we are very proud of, and a brand that we associate with. And the brand is, of course, Cotton Made in Africa, which in Europe we are seeing more and more people wanting this brand because it's rain-fed, it's sustainable, it's traceable, and you can actually identify back to the farmer group that actually grew this cotton. And of course, the carbon neutrality in Uganda is very high because 98% of Uganda's electricity is hydro, and we're not exporting the cotton. This cotton is, we're only exporting a final product. So if you look at the carbon neutrality, you look at the sustainability angle, which is what everybody is talking about, that actually helps a lot, and it actually gives you a value proposition which is not available in the rest of the world. So I think that's the end of the video. Thank you very much. I'm sorry about the voice, but I think we can upload it again for the audience. I thank you, Matthias.
Thank you, Jess. I think it was a great example of value addition and the game changer you said, from 50 million to 750 million. if we could do this in many other countries, I think that will be what everybody was looking for, and what we heard about also, that there might be a shift in the long run from Asia towards Africa. And just one word, Jess, how do you see, you said you're exporting mainly, how do you see the African market for you in the future?
We actually see a great potential in the continent of Africa. Of course, 1.2 billion people. Per capita consumption of all fibers, all textiles in the continent is very little. It's about 2.5 kilos, out of which 1 kilo is second-hand clothing. So we see a huge opportunity as we move in from the current consumption patterns of 2.5 kilos to 5 or 6 kilos. I mean, just to give you an example, at the moment, the US consumes per capita consumption of all textiles is 40 kilos. Europe is 25. China is at about 20 kilos. And about 16 kilos, and India at about 6 kilos. So as we move forward, we see that India and China, their consumption patterns are going to go up from 6 kilos to 15, and Chinese consumption will go up to 25. So China and India will become the world's biggest market, considering the sheer size of 2.7 billion people, 40% of the world's market in terms of population. So there'll be a big shift in global demand, and that shift for the consumption in Europe, US, and Africa will largely come from Africa. So I see a huge opportunity.
Great. I think that's what we all hope for, and that's what we all try to work towards. No? So Jasminda, thanks very much for the insights as a manufacturer, and good luck for your next presentation and talk at UNCTAD. Lisa, your microphone is still on. Could you switch it off so that we are not hearing any disturbances? Okay, I'm not sure what you heard from me, because I think I was muted when I was talking. Anyway, thank you very much, Jasminda, for these insights, and good luck for your presentation now at UNCTAD, at the UNCTAD conference. Now let us come back to the original kind of plan of the logic of the second webinar. We'll now look into cotton production in Africa widely with a sustainability angle, and would like to invite Usman Kanwa from the International Cotton Advisory Committee, ICAC. He's the head of textile innovation, a new post that has been created in ICAC to ensure also that cotton is connected to the industry and finally to the market. And well, he has been in the industry for over 26 years, mainly in Pakistan, but at policy level, at the private sector level, also at the academic level. Usman, let us know how do you see the evidence of sustainable cotton production in Africa, and how this sustainability could be the starting point of developing a textile and clothing industry that is sustainable. Over to you, Usman.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Matthias, for giving the opportunity to share evidence of sustainable cotton production in Africa. We all know that the world is moving towards sustainable solutions, and cotton production systems and cotton products are now being evaluated for sustainability with an objective to improve them. Cotton production systems are very divergent in various regions of different countries across the world. There are differences in various aspects that influence sustainability. For example, the input usage, water usage, farm size, scale of operations, level of mechanization, tillage methods, soil management, labor requirement, GM, non-GM, organic, etc. Sustainability is built on 3 pillars recognized by the United Nations, which are social, economic, and environmental. ICAC collects and compiles data with focus on 3 pillars every year. On all these 3 aspects from 38 top cotton producing countries, our data clearly reveals that African cotton production systems are inherently sustainable on many fronts, especially in water, fertilizer, pesticide, and social aspect. Now, let's take a look at the details. Now, here first is blue water utilization. Irrigation water is referred as blue water. Majority of the African countries such as Zimbabwe, Zambia, Uganda, Togo, Tanzania, Nigeria, Mali, Chad, Cameroon, you can see that they do not use irrigation water to cultivate cotton. Hence, the blue water used to produce 1 kg of lint is 0. Ethiopia only uses 62 liters, South Africa nearly 1,300 liters, Egypt little bit high, around 11,000 liters, while the world average is close to 1,900 liters, ranging from 0 in majority of the African countries to highest in Turkmenistan, which is around 13,600 liters to produce 1 kilogram of lint cotton. So next we will, please, next slide. Yeah, pesticide. So cotton has a market share of around 5% of all the pesticides sold globally. Amongst pesticides, herbicides has the highest market share, followed by bactericides and insecticides. However, amongst all these pesticides, the sale of insecticide is highest on cotton, with a market share of 11% of all insecticides used in global cotton crop protection. So pesticide utilization in China and Israel is 13 kilogram per hectare, Brazil at 6 kilograms, South Africa and Egypt at 2 kilogram, while all remaining African countries, interestingly, they are less than 1 kilogram per hectare. And you can see that Tanzania, Mali, Uganda, they are all close to 1%, I mean 1 kilogram. So this is another point which can show easily that pesticides are used very less in African continent. Can I have the next slide, please? The world average nitrogen use is 132 kgs per hectare. Amongst all the nutrients, nitrogen is the most important nutrient for cotton growth and productivity. However, amongst all other nutrients, nitrogen contributes most directly to global warming by emitting nitrous oxide and ammonia. Now, nitrogen application is lowest across Africa. Majority of the African countries use less than 8 kilogram per hectare. Ethiopia uses 24 kilogram per hectare. South Africa is at 125, while Egypt is the only African country using more than the world average, is at 224 kilogram per hectare. While highest, you can see that Australia is at 257 kilogram per hectare. Next, please. The average world average use of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium is 219 kgs per hectare. NPK, again, is the major nutrient for cotton growth and productivity. The use of phosphorus and potassium fertilizer could lead to eutrophication, but does not result in serious greenhouse gas emissions. Countries, namely Australia, Egypt, Uzbekistan, South Africa, Pakistan, China, India, Brazil apply NPK quantities higher than the global average, you can see, and the NPK application is lowest again across Africa. Against world average of 219 kilogram per hectare, majority of the African countries are less than 10 kilogram per hectare. Next. Yes, the global average cotton lint yield is 760 kilogram per hectare. Yields are very low in Africa, which is rightly mentioned in previous presentations. About 12 African countries, their cotton yield is less than 400 kilogram per hectare. And while few are having bit high, the low yields in these countries reduce input use efficiency as well and cause concerns for economic and environmental sustainability. Therefore, it is important that to identify sustainable technologies that can help these African countries to increase yield with least changes in input usage. Now, ICAC has initiated a mission approach to assist researchers and governments in Africa to test, validate, adopt global best sustainable strategies for higher yields, and they can give dividends over the period of time. Next, please. Cotton is a linchpin of African economy, and you can see in the slide that the production of cotton employs millions in African countries and generate billions of dollars in economic activity. Importantly, it is also a source of distribution of wealth in most corners, hundreds of kilometers away from urbanization. And these numbers are totally clear that, like all other countries, it is a source of major employment generation in Africa. Next. Textile companies and brands across the world are in an effort to reduce their material impact and are in search of more sustainable sources of cotton. The key concerns are, one, firstly, this is water, pesticide, nitrogenous fertilizer, which cause the most significant environmental problems in the cotton systems. And utilization of all these are quite low in majority of cotton grown in Africa, making it more sustainable than any other region. Further, you can see that African cotton is part of many sustainable programs such as Cotton Made in Africa, Better Cotton Initiative, Organic Fair Trade, Global Organic Textile, and in short, we can easily say that an estimated 48,000 trillion liters of irrigation water is used for cotton production, while 95% of cotton in Africa is rain-fed. And majority of the African countries depend solely on rainfall for cotton production. There are 15 African cotton growing countries. They do not use irrigation water to cultivate cotton. Hence, the blue water used to produce 1 kg of lint is 0. Pesticide, we have seen that pesticide utilization is also very low. Major cotton growing African countries barely use machines in their cotton production operations. Therefore, their energy use and greenhouse gas footprints are negligible. And lastly, we have seen that use of fertilizer is also very low in Africa. A little bit, I'll talk on the life cycle assessment. We all know that LCA is a system-based quantitative method for evaluating the environmental impact of a product. And for a typical cotton product, we can divide it as cotton production, fabric production, garment manufacturing, transportation, distribution, consumer care, and end of product, we can divide among those. And cotton production contributes by a far margin to water consumption. Textile consists of a wide range of products having various finishes. However, around 2/3 water is utilized in cotton production and 1/3 in textile processes and consumer care. Therefore, if we use cotton in which blue water is used minimum, it would reduce the total blue water consumption in a product, making it more sustainable. Similarly, cotton production again contributes by a far margin to eutrophication. Around 3/5 eutrophication is from the cotton production and remaining 2/5 from consumer care and fabric production. Therefore, utilizing cotton from a sustainable source such as Africa would improve the sustainability of entire textiles value chain. However, for this purpose, they need to develop a cotton textiles value chain, which everybody has talked about, utilizing their own cotton production, and ICC is here to facilitate them with the support of their partners. Thank you. Thank you, Matthias.
Thank you, Usman. I think data speak louder than some words sometimes, and I think you have clearly shown that there is an argument on sustainability with regard to African cotton production. So having looked at Africa as a whole on the continent, we now deep a little bit into a country or a specific region, into South Africa and maybe also a little bit Southern Africa with Tanya Ocamp, not sure how to pronounce. She's communication manager at Cotton SA, and she also plays an active role in South Africa cotton industry cluster, or the cotton, South Africa cotton cluster, I think it's called. So maybe Tanya, share a little bit with the experience with us on how you see this development of a value chain in a specific country or region, starting from sustainable cotton and how it's working. Over to you, Tanya.
Thank you, Matthias, and good day to all our panelists and attendees to this webinar today. It's an honor for South Africa to be part of this celebration of World Cotton Day, which is tomorrow, and this is for the second time that we've been celebrating cotton as the incredible fiber. I hope the sound is clear because it's echoing on my side. Thank you, Matthias, for confirming that. For South Africa, we've been privileged to have a very close value chain partnership with our retailers. So Cotton SA is a non-profit organization, and we play a role by linking all the value chain role players from farm to fashion. So our previous speaker from Mozambique was incorrect in saying that they're the only country that do an integrated value chain. South Africa is very proud to also have a success story in that regard. For Cotton SA, primarily they focus on quality control, managing the lab, ensuring that all the cotton that's produced in South Africa is graded independently, make sure that everybody in the value chain receives what the scope is for. We do a lot of research and development. We focus on training, specifically on the smallholder farmers and the development of those farmers. And then we are also the implementer of the Better Cotton initiative. It's sad that Lisa couldn't do her presentation to elaborate more on that. I'll just briefly speak on that later in my presentation. We act as an information hub, ensuring information in the whole value chain in South Africa, and then also making sure that the correct promotion is done, and also placing the emphasis on sustainability when we do that. We do the required promotion around that. Moving to the next slide, you will see the cotton production areas in South Africa. So they're very close to the borders of our neighboring countries, and we are way under capacity in terms of production. In 2013, there was a very down scale in the cotton production. Then in 2019, we had the celebration of 800% growth in cotton production, meaning more yield at farm level. This was created through a value chain discussion program. Natasha from Mr. Price, they were the leading retailers that took hands with Cotton SA, and this project was funded through government, and it's one of the huge success stories in terms of how collaboration and bringing all the role players in a value chain to a table and have open discussions can improve the economy. And this is very definitely something we can look at in Africa. More than 60% of our farmers also produce on dry land, and for many of them, this is the only crop that they can plant is cotton. For others, it's a very good rotation crop. We've got numerous feedback from our farmers that say after they've planted, they rotate cotton with another crop as maize or sunflower. There's a significant improvement in the yield of the other crop following the cotton. We have not done the scientific research to be able to determine what the impact of the cotton on the soil and the pH balance of the soil is, but through the yield generated and testimonial from the farmers, this is really impacting on their yield. We also did research in terms of moisture retainment in the soil with cotton, and after harvesting the cotton, the soil moisture was higher than before the cotton harvesting. So cotton is not this thirsty bad crop that it's been perceived or branded to be by many countries. For us, it's clearly a crop that restores the environment, that improves the lives of the farmers, not only those that plant cotton directly, but also those that use cotton as a rotation crop with other crops. We are going back to the integrated value chain, working from farm to fashion. We realize that this is an industry where we need to take hands. We need to create honest and open conversations, and you need to work together. If we want to improve competitiveness, it's linked on open conversations. Unfortunately, the cluster program closed down in 2019 due to a lack of funding. But the critical conversations we have with our retail partners have not stopped. So we're still in very good conversation and good support with the original role players, Mr. Price Group, as well as Woolworths, that still support our farmers and the value chain discussions. Our capability and capacity links are at spinner level. So the cotton needs to about between 70 and 80% of the cotton is exported into Africa and also imported from Africa. Mauritius is one of our biggest consumers of South African cotton. And then because of the volumes and the consistency for spinning, the spinners in South Africa import mainly from Africa and Zambia specific their cotton, which is proof of integrated value chain opportunities in Africa to stimulate the economy and create better linkages through that. South Africa is also not very high in terms of textile manufacturing. So also linking the value chain into Africa, taking hands with some of our countries that actually do have the capability, the capacity to do the manufacturing of the textiles. For South Africa, we are for Cotton SA, we are the implementing agents for the Better Cotton initiative. So in South Africa, we do use the GM cotton. This goes about which all the speakers today have said. Sustainability is not only about the environment; it's also about the people and the financial sustainability, and with that, the environment. We did a survey on organic cotton. It's not financially viable, and it was not to the better of our people. So looking at the Better Cotton Initiative, which is the biggest growing sustainable cotton standard worldwide, and the fact that it allows the GM cotton, which reduces the use of pesticide, and even if it's not promoted to increase yield, it does increase the yield because you've got less chemicals and a better cotton management principles that you implement. But for South Africa, it goes about the people. So we have very strict legislation in terms of the way that employment is managed, with minimum wages, decent housing, making sure that people are looked after. Unfortunately for us, in terms of the use of electricity, that has a negative impact on our carbon footprint. Electricity is extremely expensive in South Africa. The positive part of that is it's used very scarcely. So even in the areas where we do have irrigation farming, they need electricity to do the irrigation. So it's done really to get the cotton to germinate. So it's not like flooding water, overusing electricity, and with that also ensuring a greener footprint in the cotton we produce. 65% of our current crop has been licensed as BCI cotton. And with that cotton, SA has also presented a cotton mark. If you don't manage your brand and you manage your process, you get into a situation where sustainability becomes a buzzword or a greenwashing thing, where misleading information is presented and there's not clear labeling or clear branding around that. For South Africa, we've got a Proudly South Africa mark that emphasizes the fact that products are manufactured in South Africa. Cotton SA went a step further and created a South African cotton mark to say that the product associated with this mark is produced in South Africa under the sustainable principles that we promote. And unfortunately, because of lack of technology and cost, there's not a clear technical traceability right through our value chain, but we can, up to the spinner level, we can trace the cotton. It's goes through the lab and it's graded bale for bale. Selection is done by the spinners bale for bale, and through a mass balance principle, we can indicate that the product line used through the specific retailer either has 100% or 90% south on a mass balance pure cotton, and we also allow for the blended cotton mark. And with these identification marks, we give the consumer the trust to know that you are supporting a South African farmer by producing this. And at the end of the day, it's about the demand. It's about the customer voting with their wallet. It's about the customer saying, we demand a more sustainable product. And I realize that African consumer is not necessarily educated enough to create that demand. But we are getting there, and we're moving towards that. And South Africa, our retailers and Cotton SA is in full support of supporting a sustainable cotton production line. So I will stay online if there's any questions coming up later.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Tanya. I think it was great insights. I noted a couple of catchy things that you said. No, at the importance of working together and have an open, frank conversation about all the players, and also that you continue doing this. That organic cotton is not necessarily always viable, and you talked about the research you did about the cotton crop is not needing that much water than people say, so the bad crop. And it's actually the whole theme a little bit also about World Cotton Day this year. It's about telling the truth about cotton worldwide. And okay, the African consumer, maybe we hear later from Mr. Price also on the African consumer and their slow move towards demanding more sustainable products. So stay please online, and because I would like to move now to the next speaker, and I know that she is under pressure, time pressure, because she has other speaking obligation. So I would like now to move towards textile consumption again, and now look into the artisanal fiber consumption in Africa. And we are proud that we have Miss Ina Moja with us. I hope she's still there, who is the founder of the NGO Jiriso. And she has also been UN ambassador on the Great Green Wall in the Sahel, on the Sahel region and climate change. Ina, I give it to you the floor. And sorry for the little delay.
Thank you very much, Matthias. Hello, everybody. It's really such a great honor to be with you tonight. As a climate activist and focusing a lot on women and girls, to me, investing in sustainable cotton production is to invest in women and girls. And I would like to talk to you a little bit about the work that we're doing in Jiriso, which is a non-profit environmental organization that is focused mainly on creating green jobs and empower women and young people in climate decision making through education program based on skills training and green jobs. Because to us, women bear an outsized burden of the global warming crisis, largely because of gender inequalities. And in many parts of the world, as we know, women hold traditional roles as primary caregivers in family and communities, and also are the main providers of food and water. And so they are more vulnerable when flooding and drought and different terrible climate negative impacts happen. So that's why we created in Mali, in the heart of the Sahel, Jiriso. And it was born from the urgent and global need to create green jobs. And our goal is to help slowing down desertification and further empower women and finding economical independence and dignity through professionalization and training skills in sustainable fashion and design industry. And so one of the ideas to connect women and youth in difficulty with artisans, professionals, and talented artists in order to learn these new skills and ethical techniques and create sustainable programs, working in close collaboration with different local artisanal communities that specialize in various traditional craftsmanship techniques, using only 100% local organic cotton, recycled materials, natural techniques like plant-based dye, indigo, or bogolanfini, and more. And so for us, one of the main issues that we had as brand clothing and accessories oriented mainly towards made in Africa and using organic cotton, sustainable. Our greatest difficulty is the weakness of the supply of raw materials and the lack of qualified labor in Mali. But as in recent years, demand has grown so much higher than the supply, we face the urgent need for local transformation, more spinning factories, training, and innovation. So that's the reason why we encourage the country to invest in local transformation of organic cotton, because it can really change the life of communities and really help create a more sustainable living for communities. And also helping women and girls is helping the country, because they are the backbone to us of Africa. And that's a way that we want to contribute on changing the continent. And also me as living partly in Africa and partly in Europe, I see how sustainability is really, really growing in consumers' demand. And Africa is a great place because we have so much young people willing to learn new skills. And if we create a space for them to be able to contribute on this growing demand, to be able to respond on this growing demand, we will be able to face all the unemployment and difficulties that young people and women are facing. Because as we know, 50% of the Sahel region are less than 25 years old. If we are able to really empower them through using sustainability and using the organic cotton from Africa, we are going to create a real change in the future of Africa, and that I truly believe in. Thank you, Matthias. The floor is yours.
This was sweet, short and sweet. I think you highlighted a couple of very important things. No, the aspect for whom we'll do all this. No, for whom to create jobs in the value chain. No, for the young population and for the women. And that's part of sustainability also. The environment and the social aspects, whom good jobs should be created for. I think you also highlighted an aspect that we, in some of our projects, are also facing. You know, the ITC Ethical Fashion Initiative that works with you in Mali and in Burkina Faso, some activities we do on artisanal fiber value addition in Zambia, is that there is the creativity of local artisans, and they would like to do it. But the raw material in terms of yarn is locally not really available. So because
Absolutely.
either there's no spinning factory available, and again, it needs to be imported. And maybe
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that contributes also to the changing climate. I mean, if we are able to transform and have spinning factories to start with, before even transforming those textiles, this is going to create a huge change in how we are consuming locally, because it's Mali, for example, is one of the principal producer of cotton in Africa. And usually on the market, what people are able to buy and are willing to buy are products that have been exported, transformed, and sent back to the marketplaces. So if we are really able to promote the transformation and from A to Z, and also having this available for them to buy, this will also change the way they consume.
Okay, so you're saying if there were spinning facilities that artisans could use this, make the local dresses, and this would also have a positive impact on reducing maybe the secondhand clothing that's coming into Africa, which was mentioned also today several times.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the fact that they need more spinning factories and also the skills and the training, it will create green jobs, and it will create textiles that people can be able to use locally. So it is actually a stunt that kills a lot of birds at the same time.
Right. So it's just a question of how can we attract the investment into something which is relatively expensive, spinning, and which uses a lot of electricity, which we heard, at least in South Africa, is relatively expensive.
Absolutely. That is part of my job as a climate activist for in the project of the Great Green Wall, is really showing the world that if we invest in sustainability and if we invest in green sustainable agriculture in Africa, it is something that is going to benefit the whole world, because at the end of the journey, when the Great Green Wall will be achieved, or when sustainability will be truly something that is very often, as it is absolutely not in Mali right now, this is something that we're going to change the face of Africa.
And you do see this as a kind of a national kind of approach, or a regional approach, or continental approach, or all?
I see it as a global approach, because we can create, there is a demand in the whole world, and Africa is can be able to respond to that demand. And what my work is to push investors to invest in Africa, to really be able to answer to that demand. And also in places where people are not really economical partners right now with the global demand, create that space for them. And that's why we started the pilot of Jiliso in Mali. But at the end of the journey, it is something that we are going to export in all countries of where the Great Green Wall is, from Senegal to Djibouti, all across Africa.
Okay, great. If you had anything which you can also share with us, so that we also can put this on our websites and also the WTO website about the NGO Jiriso, that would be
absolutely
also quite great.
I will send you the whole document.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ina. Okay, so let us now come to the next part, which is looking into the demand side of textiles and clothing products made from African cotton on the continent and in the US. So I will then now invite Ms. Ambrosius from the Mr. Price Group, and Natasha is the head of sustainability at Mr. Price Group, and she's also the director of Mr. Price Foundation. And I would like, I'm very excited to have her here and to share with us a little bit about the demand side for products that are actually coming from Africa, but maybe also a little bit complementing of what Tanya has been saying earlier. How do you see it as a retailer, the conversation with farmers, and do you think this could also be scaled up on the continent? Please, Natasha, up to you.
Good afternoon, and to all the guests, and thank you so much for the invitation. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, I think there's I mean, great speakers today. Thank you very much for that. I've had lots of notes that I've made, great insights. Hopefully we can connect some people. Because I think as a South African retailer, or actually home-based South Africa, but as you stated earlier, operating in 8 African countries, we definitely see great opportunities for the value chain production on the African continent. I think as a retailer, we've already made commitments to localize more production, particularly in South Africa, but we produce in mostly the SADC region in terms of a CMT base. And I think that we see massive opportunities, but the key thing is that we do need, and I think most of the speakers have said it, we need capability. We have found quite a few bottlenecks, and it's all been mentioned today. And I'll speak a little bit later around what some of the opportunities that we can just see in the immediate term as a business for ourselves, and definitely as a representative also on the South African Master Plan strategy. Many other retailers. As Tanya said, I represent obviously Mr. Price Group, but Woolworths has also been a partner in the cotton cluster. There are another big retailer, the Fashinis Group, that is looking into this and wanting to source South African cotton or African cotton. So the demand is there, and the demand is also there for sustainable cotton. And retailers are wanting to sit at the table to work with the value chain to actually develop this capability. So I think the time is right, and it's really just about connecting the dots and working out the economic modeling, and hopefully attract the right investors to be able to deal with the bottlenecks. So if I could just start, I don't know if I could I just move my slides, or, oh, there we go. So how did we get involved in this? In 2012, we did a feasibility study as a business. Our question was, could we sell products in our stores that was made from South African cotton? We didn't know the answer, so we did the feasibility study, and we were very surprised when we found that there was SADC cotton in our products. And that gave us hope, because that's when we realized we could actually localize a lot more than what we thought initially, and that could actually be a local value chain. Somebody mentioned earlier, I think it was a previous speaker, around jobs. And that was really our driving motivation, because in South Africa, I think most of you know, we have incredibly high unemployment and incredibly high youth unemployment. And as a retailer, we see that as a significant concern in terms of sustainable future for South Africa. So that was the question that we asked. We wanted to know how we could actually activate a value chain in South Africa. And that's actually when we met up with Cotton SA, and started initiating what was then established eventually in 2015, because we had to get funding from government, and established a South African cotton cluster. Some of the speakers that presented today have been involved in that cotton cluster. Definitely ICAC, BCI have been involved. So we've had a lot of support from various different entities and individuals around the world that have actually helped us to be able to establish this cotton cluster. So I just wanted to show the slide, because this is where we got involved. When you can see, as I mentioned, we did the feasibility study in around about 2012. This was volatility of what was going on in the cotton production at the time. And the discussion was really that, in fact, I remember the cotton SAP individuals are saying, we throw our last dice now. We actually need to come up with a plan. And it was a really meaningful discussion at the time, because the cotton production, as Tanya said earlier, it really hit quite a low. And so if we could just show in the next slide, we then after, if you could look at this slide, you can see at 2015, when we established a cotton cluster, what actually happened. What happens when a retailer gets involved and the demand sits at the table? Because we can orchestrate certain things. And we can work with our value chain partners. And I have to say, at the time, we were really more familiar with our first tier supply chain, but establishing this kind of conversation across the value chain with a cluster actually enabled us to understand the challenges at a production level, understand the challenges at a spinning level, and be familiar with that, and co-create solutions. And I have to say that they've got a long road to go. We certainly want to increase as a business our cotton procurement in South Africa. We're still limited by what we can do. So we do procure across more than just South Africa. Our cotton do come from other African countries as well. But we certainly see a big opportunity. For example, retailers in South Africa in 2020 procured or produced and procured over 200 million units in South Africa. Now, Mr. Price Group, of that, Mr. Price Group was about 80 million units. Now, if you can see there that we, over time, have procured 20 million units over this period, 12,000 tons, converted it to 20 million units, roundabout, of towels and T-shirts. And we believe currently, if our 2020 units that we produce in South Africa in CMT factories could go to about 40 million units, and we believe we can do that, but the bottlenecks are stopping us. We have serious constraints at spinning level. We've spoken earlier about the textile production. In fact, just to give an example, we've got two big home divisions, home businesses, and just with the units that they actually sell, we believe that we could keep a textile plant for sheeting, wide loom sheeting production, busy all year round with the volumes that we produce. So that's one retailer. And so it really is, the demand is there. It's really just about getting the investors and unlocking this. So that slide also just show how we actually communicate to our customer. We talk about Southern African cotton because it is broader than just South Africa, although we do target South African cotton specifically because of the socioeconomic elements that's linked to it. And there's obviously the partnership with BCI Cotton as well. Then just in terms of, sorry, if I could just go to the next slide. We've also had to get involved at small scale farmer level. So I think most of those on this webinar would know that if you're in cotton production, or particularly in South Africa, there isn't any funding for input costs. You know, government kind of gets involved here and there, but by and large, they don't get the funding that they need, or the funding is too late. So we were approached by Cotton SA a few years ago as a retailer to assist with input finance for small scale farmers. And we did that for over 3 years. I think it was over 60 million at one point a year that we would invest in the input costs of small scale farmers. It was a loan, so they did repay the loan. And I have to just say that this was, whilst we had a few losses, by and large, it was actually a really good investment and it worked really, really well. We are now in discussions to try and see if we can get a sustainable finance vehicle up and running for this, because, you know, it's just something that we as a retailer feel is very difficult for us to manage so far down the value chain. But this is also one of the bottlenecks that actually stops more production. These farmers have got land and they've got the skills. They just need the input finance. And if they get that input finance, they produce beautiful cotton. So, and also just one story I wanted to tell about a group of women in the Kumasi area. We looked at the cotton that they produced and the yields that they got and the income that they generated. It's definitely cotton by far are one of the commodities and certainly one of the products that can unlock a lot of wealth. And so we really believe it's the right thing to invest in. Just on the next slide, these are just some of the products that I just visually wanted to show. I didn't have latest T-shirts, but these are some of the towels that we sell in our sports stores. We also sell it in our home and sheet street stores. And you can also see some of the textiles that we actually produce. And over millions of units of actual T-shirts that we've also been able to produce within South Africa in the value chain. And then there are some remaining challenges. I think most of the panelists have been talking about that. Value chain capability is really a challenge for us. We actually want to procure more cotton locally, but we need the conversion. We certainly have some suppliers that are standing in line. And sustainable cotton is quite important for us. We're not specifically linked to a specific cotton standards. Cotton made in Africa is good for us, but BCI is good for us. We have no problem with using both of those, but we certainly, it is something that we do promote with our customers, and we have targets to increase sustainable cotton for our business. I mentioned about the affordable finance for small scale farmers. Commercial banks charge a lot of interest, and we really need to look at financial vehicles that actually don't charge such significant interest to these farmers. And then, of course, the structural and systemic issues, as I mentioned earlier, I think it's a whole value chain approach. And if we could all sit together between demand, and it doesn't only have to be in South Africa, it can be across African countries, where we can sit together and say, what can we bring to the table to unlock this? Run the economic modeling. I really do believe the emerging market multinationals in South Africa would be at the table to have a discussion. So just lastly, I just wanted to thank you for this opportunity. I don't know if there's any questions. That cotton image, by the way, is actually from a piece of land where I actually stood there when that photograph was taken. So that's very real and very special to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Natasja. So that's South African cotton, BCI.
That is it, yes.
Okay. Or say not BCI, sustainable cotton.
Yes.
Okay, great. So there was some really great insights. I think you summarized the challenges yourself, so that I don't need to do this. But I think you said yourself, one has to see what happens if the demand side sits at the table and can orchestrate a little bit also along the value chain. I think this is something maybe also the whole of Africa needs to look at a little bit. Not only Africa, also I saw a comment here and there also in the chat saying, okay, they are also learnings for other countries outside of Africa from this. And I think what you're trying in South Africa, trying to expand maybe to SADC, and then even further into at least the countries you are operating stores, I think that would go a long way in developing a sustainable value chain from the farm to the retailer in all within Africa. And I think you also gave an example of your demand, actually. No, you referred to home furnishing and saying all the demand we have for home furnishing could be there could be one textile mill busy the whole year, just working for us, but we just need to get the investor on board. So maybe there's something to look at, all of us, and maybe also ITC, to see how we can work with possible investors to make this happen. Because the demand side is there, and if the demand side is there, I think one can also possibly convince some of the mills that are looking now in Africa, that presently maybe are in Asia, but looking into Africa to see what can be done on the continent and then also beyond. We have a little question answer afterwards, after our last speaker. And actually this beyond what I mentioned, Africa and beyond, is now the next speaker. I would like to invite Julia Huge, president of the US Fashion Industry Association. She represents basically most of the major, larger and smaller US brands and retailers that source garments outside of the US, not only, but mainly outside of the US. And AGOA is an important part, but also agility within the supply chain is important. So a supply chain within Africa probably also will help the demand side in the United States. Julia?
Thank you, Matthias, and thanks to everyone. It is terrific to join today and this World Cotton Day presentation. And I appreciate the chance to talk a little bit about a US perspective on the importance of sourcing and sustainability. Next slide. I just want to do 2 slides just to say, so US Fashion Industry Association, what is our mantra is fashion made possible by global trade. And that reflects the fact that our members are mainly US based, but selling around the world, sourcing around the world, global companies that we do business with. Next slide. So, all right, so let's jump to, what I really want to pull, our work for the industry is we focus on communication about what's happening today, education, insights on how companies can do more and learn more about sourcing or about policy decisions or about logistics issues. We're not going to talk about that today. And then advocacy, sharing views and making recommendations, obviously predominantly focused here in the US, but also sharing those views globally. So let's go to the next slide and let's get going here. So a lot of what I want to share are some insights from our benchmarking survey, which we do each year. And we ask brands and retailers to share their perspectives on what are the key issues of the day. Let's go to the next slide. So what I want to focus on here is both the sourcing side, but also the importance of social responsibility and sustainability. And we've talked about it so much here, and I want to reinforce the fact that it is really important to the US brands and retailers as well. So even with what happened in the past year and a half and the impact of COVID, financially, operational challenges. Some of our members are no longer in business because of the financial pressures created by COVID. Companies remain highly committed to both sustainability and social compliance in their supply chains. And I think that kind of helps us flow into talking about what are some of the opportunities for Africa sourcing. Let's go to the next slide. So companies are revisiting some of their business practices, looking at what one of our members calls the learnings of COVID, right? How can we improve? How can we do business better? How can we rely on the technology that's available for us? But what I think is really valuable and an insight into the importance of sustainability and social responsibility for brands is the fact that they're allocating more resources in these areas. So let's go to the next slide. I pulled a table from our benchmarking survey that kind of looks at how did companies answer the question of allocation of resources. And, to be perfectly frank, I think most everyone would have assumed that there would be fewer resources towards sustainability. I remember seeing a number of, articles in the media about that, but obviously a huge increase in more resources on certification programs on sustainability and social compliance. So, how can we be sure that what we think is in our supply chain is really there, but also increased resources to training. So more training both for employees and for suppliers on what companies mean by social compliance and what do we mean by sustainability. Even more important is the plan to increase resources for more employees dedicated to sustainability and social compliance, since if you're hiring more people, even in this time where business is bad, I think that reflects the commitment. So let's move on to the next slide, because obviously this is the key for everyone here, and I recognize that I'm standing between us in Q&A. So let me share these views and hopefully we have some really good questions. So from a US perspective, we still have very high tariffs in place. And that means that for African countries that qualify for AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, and can ship duty-free to the US, there's a terrific opportunity. So I want to just put, you may not realize what are the tariff rates. So if we look at yoga pants that when you're on Zoom, probably many people are wearing, the tariff for imports to the US is 28%. If we look at a cotton t-shirt, it's 16.5%. If we look at a man-made fiber t-shirt, it's 32%. So in general, brands and retailers are taking fresh looks at sourcing from duty-free locations such as Africa. So you already there's an opportunity there. Let's go to the next slide. I know, I put the tables here because I know you'll be able to see these later, even though it's a little hard to follow all of it today. But what is the main sourcing strategy that we hear from brands and retailers? Almost all companies are doing some sourcing in China. Almost all companies are doing some sourcing in Vietnam. So we talk about a sourcing strategy that's China plus Vietnam plus many. So for most brands and retailers, after China and Vietnam, there's a wide array of where are they sourcing. But let's drill down for this conversation to look at Africa, because again, to me, this is, you could say, oh, this is terrible, but I actually think this shows the opportunity that exists, because more than half of the respondents said they're not sourcing in Africa. which is crazy, right? After what we've heard during all the presentations today of the opportunities that are available, particularly for sourcing cotton products that are in high consumer demand, that Africa makes sense. So, more than half aren't sourcing there. And for those who are, the majority are sourcing less than 10% of their value is coming, less than 30% of their value is coming from Africa. So what does that mean for that small percentage? For those companies who are sourcing in Africa today, and you see, none of our respondents said they're sourcing more than 50%. None of the respondents said they're sourcing more than 31%. But we do have a group from 1% to 30% already sourcing. That to me represents a base for how can we grow the sourcing in Africa today. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, another, and this is probably my favorite table, in that it's kind of like your Yelp review for sourcing. And so this is not saying what exists necessarily. This is the perception. This is the assessment of what do sourcing executives think are the opportunities. And again, we see, you could say that it's a negative story for AGOA, but I actually think it's a positive story because people don't know what's happening, as we could see from today's presentations, right? Of what kind of vertical integration exists, what kind of sustainable projects exist. So put aside speed to market, because that is an issue that to the US market from Africa is more difficult, obviously, to deal with. But if we're talking about risks of environmental compliance or labor and social compliance, I think there's a very positive story to communicate. And I also think that the issue of flexibility and agility, which is kind of the intangible for many sourcing executives when they make decisions. We've heard today of so many examples of how companies and how industry groups are making a difference and are flexible and are improving the opportunities for sourcing, that I think we are going to see an improvement in these rankings going forward. So let's go to the next slide. And this is kind of the last cluster of slides to talk about. So what are the sourcing opportunities for AGOA, and how can we talk specifically? So in our benchmarking survey, for the 41% said that they plan to increase their sourcing from AGOA. So as we looked at the chart, not everybody is sourcing there, but 41% said they plan to look to increase their sourcing. And who are those top suppliers right now? And I think Joss might have had a slide like this as well. Kenya, Ethiopia, Madagascar, Lesotho, and Mauritius are the top suppliers today, but there's a lot of opportunity, particularly for the cotton products. Let's go to the next slide. So in the reporting from brands and retailers, so not quite as high a percentage said they have been sourcing more textiles and apparel since AGOA was renewed. And I don't want to get too deep into the weeds of the policy here, but one of the problems from US sourcing perspectives is that we have a duty-free program that is temporary, that needs renewal. There may be 5-year renewals. Right now, we're in the middle of a 10-year renewal, which has made a big difference to help companies look more at AGOA. But when we note that 41% say they plan to expand further through 2023, part of that time issue is that our AGOA benefits would expire in 2025 without renewal. Now, I want to say renewal of AGOA and early renewal is something that's on our agenda. And just this week, or maybe it was last week, we were talking with a delegation in DC and their embassy about how we can start moving forward on that. So we know duty-free is important. And I wanted to include the percentage that say the third country fabric provision is critical, because you may say, well, wait, that's undercutting what we're doing here in Africa of sourcing from the cotton through the ginning, through the spinning, through the textiles to the apparel. But actually, once again, I think it's a good number because it shows that if companies, sourcing executives can have a balance of sourcing fabric anywhere in the world to be able to adapt to what is the consumer demand, allows them to maintain that base to enhance their sourcing of 100% Africa cotton and Africa inputs. So I think that kind of balanced sourcing always works and is a benefit with sourcing executives. So let's go to the next slide. Another table for you, but I really want to just share with you the specific numbers of, companies who said they've increased their sourcing value or volume since 2015, and that's up 11% this year versus the year before, even with COVID, which decimated a lot of the imports. My company has made or plans to make more investment in AGOA, such as building factories or expanding sourcing capacities. I think many have criticized the American brands and retailers for not focusing on the investment aspect. And I think the fact that while that still is a relatively low number, it has jumped in 2021 versus 2019. I think that increase is a positive and shows that more than before, brands are seeing investment opportunities. And then lastly, in the next 5 years, my company will strategically adjust or redesign the supply chain based on AGOA, which is an amazing statement to make, that companies are factoring in and making changes because of the opportunities that are in Africa. So let's go to the next slide. So I think we see a growing interest. The fact that folks are talking about redesigning supply chains is really essential. We internally have to deal with the issue of the temporary nature of AGOA, but I think we see a positive. And let's go to the next slide. So, and this is my last slide, because I want to just reiterate, obviously quality, price, sustainable production, all the things we've been talking about today that are available in Africa are huge. And I think it reflects the fact, and I did this before I heard everyone today, so I'm even more convinced that the time is right to expand sourcing of cotton from Africa. So thanks for the chance to join you today. And I think we have time for questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. That was a great insight from the US perspective. And I think you said it right. The time is right for Africa. But you also said maybe not everybody among your members or the retail sector in the US knows the details about it. So there's also an aspect of communication maybe, and sharing with them the opportunities that lay out in Africa. But it's encouraging that there's increase already. Despite COVID, you said it's increasing. And that everybody's looking to have this many that you mentioned, the China plus Vietnam plus many, the African share in this many gets bigger. So there's great opportunity, and hope we can also work together with you and the USFEA and your members, not to communicate the positive things about Africa and help create these linkages.
Thank you. I think today is a great start, and we will definitely be sharing all of this and the links with our members. So thank you. Okay, super. So we'll still have about 15 to 20 minutes of possibility of questions and answers. I think then the interpreters that have been interpreting nicely into French and to Spanish will have to leave us. So if in the audience anybody would like to answer a live question, please raise the hand. I don't see everybody, so my colleagues need to advise me, Mariana, whether there's anybody who would like to answer, pose a live question. If not, I think there was something.
Yes, we have one hand. So Marie-Louise.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
Hi. Hello, my name is Marie-Louise, and this has been such a great webinar for me to be a part of. I am currently working on a group in terms of cotton farming, but we are going into organic cotton farming. and its end-to-end processes. We are at a proof of concept stage. We have planted a sample of cotton seedlings, and it's in Ghana that we are starting our projects in. What I have found difficult, though, is investment. At the stage of raising funds for our farming, but investment that is available for startups like myself at the pre-seed proof of concept stage. I want to find out what more can be done to be able to help startups like myself where cotton farming is concerned, especially in agribusiness. I find out there's more risk for tech startups than there are for agribusinesses, especially in cotton farming. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary-Louise. I'm not sure who would like to has a good answer here. I would like to take, and I also invite our colleagues that were in the first webinar organized by the WTO to chip in if you would like.
Yes, Mary, please go ahead.
No, I think Marianne, we still are waiting someone who could potentially provide an answer to this question. I don't know whether Tanya maybe could, because you also started in South Africa from a small basis and trying to provide also financing together with maybe with Natasha on. No, I heard her also talking about finance. Maybe you have some idea. Tanya?
Matthias, could you just repeat that question? That line is very bad.
I think Maria-Louise is trying to do a startup where she starts with organic cotton production. Even you said organic is not available in South Africa, and then create something along the value chain. But her major obstacle is finance, and she's not sure where to get the finance for it.
I think access to finance is everybody's major obstacle, is to get your investment. So for us, our saving grace was the government program through the DTIC and the ITC that took hands with Cotton SA and the retailers, because the retailers showed their commitment to drive the program. And that assisted us with an original bridging finance, but as I clearly stated, organic cotton is not a viable financial option, not for the farmer or for the industry. It's a very niche market, very expensive way of producing cotton. So the best way to drive a successful program is to have a demand lead, to have a very specific client that's looking for your product and is willing to invest in that product to enable to gain the organic end product. So yeah, sorry, I do not have the answer to that question.
No, but I think you. Sorry, Marie, do we want to ask anything? I think this was a good pointer, and maybe I can ask Natasha from Mr. Price Group also, because what you said, you have to bring everybody on the table, especially demand side.
Yeah, I think I would just add to what Tanya was saying. You know, I think that the market that you're targeting is the key assistance, because as Tanya was saying, finance is a challenge. And I think if you have a customer that is very interested in your product, then that could be a way to actually bring together. So approach the customer if you have one in mind, particularly if you know of a business that specifically is looking for organic cotton. Then I think if you can sit around the table and say you want to orchestrate the value chain, I think that is definitely the best way to go, is to approach the specific customer that's interested in that product.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the answers and the question, Marie-Louise. So maybe we have a challenge. There was one question in the chat to Usman from ICAC, referring to the period or the years that you did the compiling on the statistical data you have been showing. Maybe you can just clarify the data years. Usman?
Bonsoir, vous nous entendez?
Oui, 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 on vous entend maintenant. Bonjour.
Marina, vous m'entendez?
Oui, 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 vous pouvez parler.
Donc, vous me recevez depuis le Niger. Et merci pour cette initiative. Hein. Et c'est pour nous un grand honneur d'assister à ce forum qui honore, qui rend hommage à la culture du coton. Donc, en résumé, je tiens à vous dire à vous expliquer quelque chose, quelques mots sur le coton au Niger, en Afrique en particulier. Le coton a joué un rôle important dans le développement économique de nombreux pays d'Afrique de l'Ouest. Il reste encore aujourd'hui une source importante de revenus pour de nombreux exploitants agricoles. De cultiver depuis plus d'un siècle en Afrique de l'Ouest et la région compte une industrie textile traditionnelle, non négligeable depuis plus de 50 ans. À cet effet, notre ex-président de la République, M. Mahmoud Youssouf, a mis en avant l'initiative 3M. Suite à cela, il s'est engagé pleinement dans la production et la valorisation du coton au Niger depuis 2014. Depuis 2014, la production continue. À cet effet, je tiens à demander à l'ITC et à l'Organisation mondiale du commerce quel est leur rôle, ou bien quel est leur apport dans cette production afin d'encourager les producteurs et les productrices à mieux faire dans leur activité, et aussi quels sont les moyens à mettre en place pour faciliter les débouchés de nos produits agricoles. Merci. Allô?
So, merci beaucoup pour la contribution de Niger.
Hello?
I'm not sure everybody of our audience had switched to the English translation. So I try to summarize a little bit what was said. Mainly saying he's coming from Niger. Niger is not a big cotton producer, but the country would like to go more into cotton production and also into the value chain. And he was asking the question, what can be done to encourage growers to grow more cotton, and then also find an appropriate market for their cotton and some of the value addition products that comes out of the cotton. I'm not sure who would like to take this kind of question. Maybe I have to refer again to our colleagues from South Africa.
I can maybe just give it a try. Yeah, I think, if the learnings for us was really, again, as I said earlier, you have to have the demand at the table, because your investors want to know. And even the funding that we were able to unlock from government, the demand was necessary. So I think that in order to build that type of value chain capability, in order to unlock the funding, if you have a customer that says, we will procure, I don't know, let's say 10,000, 20,000, 80,000 tons of cotton through a value chain that is created, then it attracts the investment straight away. So I really would recommend that you need to bring, and perhaps even with Julia from the US, if there is more demand from the US, maybe one can bring certain brands and retailers to the table to say, we will actually commit to this kind of demand. And that actually helps to unlock the funding to develop it. But, there's a lot of skills that needs to be developed. So you have to get all the players in the value chain around the table to discuss it. I hope that helps.
Julia, you maybe want to compliment, because Natasha was mentioning also the US.
Yeah, well, I do agree that it's valuable to have, if you have a brand who's saying, I commit to organic cotton, but it's very difficult to make that connection, right? You kind of need to make that connection with whoever is the manufacturer for the garment or maybe the apparel in order to say we're committing that this is the organic cotton that we're going to use for our brand product. So that's why I hesitated to jump in, because it's not so easy from the end user to, most of them don't nominate the exact cotton that they want to use. But I think perhaps that's something that we could work with ITC and ICAC and some of the other groups that have been on in this presentation to talk about how to help make those linkages and kind of the vertical integration that looks continent wide, not just country by country.
Thanks very much, Julie. Are there any other questions? I think there was still a question on the time period for the data that ICAC has been presenting. Usman, are you still there? Can you just clarify the time period for the data that you show?
We have 2 hands, Matthias.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Actually, the data, it was used for last year, and it is recently published in our cotton data book for June 2021.
Okay, so very recent data.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Usman. Mariana?
Yeah, we had a hand from Tanya, and another, Mary Concilia. So, Tanya, maybe you can go first.
I wanted to assist with answering that question. I stated I put a question and I was answered privately, so I'm covered. Thank you very much.
Okay, and Mary Concilia, please, you have the floor.
Once more, thank you very much for giving me the floor, especially to the organizers of this webinar. I have some concerns. I was wondering if through this opportunity, I could be able to share with you the upcoming date of the 2nd edition of FICOTA that comes up from the 10th to the 19th of December. Happening alongside would be the trade show to exhibit what happens in the industry from designers, from fashion designers, and with the models, collections being exhibited from the designers. And I also wanted to share with you that the FICOTA created a project, which is an incubation project with a few designers who pitched themselves and were able to be retained for the project. And we're looking to see how we can facilitate the training for them, because the AFP project, which is the African Fashion Project, is aimed at at tracking the efforts that are made in the industry from the farm to the market. So we see where the overlappings occur, and we really look to be able to talk with institutions of the capacity of cotton for Africa, better cotton initiative. We would like to share with the South African initiative. We're inviting them to be able to register on the FICOTA website. Online, we are at info@ficota.com, www.ficota.org. So you could register, be part of our event, because French-speaking Central Africa, I mean, the CEMAC region is really a huge potential. The cotton production and cotton company ownership has been liberalized. It's no longer a monopoly. So there is need, as I hear many saying, we need to increase on the quantities. There is potential to increase on the quantities. There is the invitation, because the Cameroon government is actually supporting FICOTA, and the development partners in Cameroon are supporting FICOTA. So it is a huge opportunity, but we are really not able to raise the kind of funding and the investment capacity that we need to invest in this project. It's an appeal to say that we are capable, we have good partners, we are focused on the project, and we would very much like to see how we transform the FICOTA platform into opportunities for vulnerable women and African youth, for more skills to avoid African youths leaving the continent. They can stay in the continent to work in this new job opportunity trade lines. And so this is the invitation that I have to put on the floor. And I'm still once more very grateful that Fikota was given an opportunity to talk here, and we look forward to see how we collaborate with WTO going forward and UNIDO going forward, and the ITC and all the organizations that are here. Thank you very much. It's our appeal as we advocate for more support from the world towards seeing how French-speaking Africa grows, CEMAC region grows into the cotton industry from local transformation. It's a real concern for us.
Thanks, Maria. I think I suggest you put something in the chat, and also then you contact Robson or Mariam Fall so that they can make sure that this information has been shared.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other further questions? Because if not, then let me ask one last question, which is a big question somehow, on how to get the investment coming. And I think what we heard today is the demand side is very important. So no, the textile mill for producing home furnishing is there in South Africa, but how can we now bring someone to invest in it? And so they have this tripartite kind of arrangement: the demand, the supply would be the investor, and maybe the government to help facilitate it. And maybe Navdeep from GATSI, maybe you have a good idea of how this could facilitate. I've seen this happening in Asia, but I have not yet seen this happening in Africa. Please unlock yourself.
Matthias, as you mentioned, that there are three actors who have to, work in tandem. Obviously, the most important actor is the FDI, because we need to attract FDI. And as I said, FDI brings three things. First of all, they bring the investment. Second is they bring the market, because they are the market. And third is they bring the expertise and the skills to transform and to make successful operations possible. Now, as far as the governments are concerned, they have a key role to play, because this is an industry which is all encompassing, because it involves the agricultural value chains, it involves employment, and it involves resources and infrastructure. But out of all these inputs, the most important is an enabling environment that the governments have to provide. So that is really the missing link which needs to be strengthened. So once the buyers are convinced, for example, the likes of VF or Hugo Boss and so on.
Mr. Price, no?
Exactly. They will be able to encourage their vendors to set up their manufacturing production operations in Africa if they are willing to source, So I think the policy makers and the governments in Africa have to really play a very key role. I mean, to some extent, it already happened in Ethiopia. So this is something that needs to be embraced by other countries also. We are working in a lot of countries as GATSI, and we have seen, that governments like in Burkina Faso, in Ghana, they are quite proactive now to, put these pieces of the puzzle together and to provide that enabling environment. I mean, if we see, what led to the transformation in Vietnam or in Bangladesh, of course, China and India already had history of textiles, and, the government and the private sector, they work really hand in hand to make this thing possible, because of the nature of this industry, So there is no magic formula. I think this is an industry which is always moving from continent to continent in search of better opportunities, better conditions. So we see that, there is an opportunity, but, the dots will need to be connected. And there, just to, conclude my brief remarks, the governments will have to play a key role. Thank you.
Thanks, Navdeep. I think absolutely right. I think it's good to re-emphasize this. I also see when you say that the FDI brings the market, often yes, because if these are large Asian companies that operate and have their traditional clients, the market is there. But we also have a market like Mr. Price within the continent that would like to buy from someone who invests. So this is something kind of same approach, but a slightly different angle. And then Julia, he mentioned some of the big US brands that would like that need to be encouraged to approach their vendors, the big Asian vendors, to maybe looking into the possibility of investing into Africa. Maybe there's something also we can have a look at.
I totally agree with that, and you're absolutely right that Ethiopia over the last 5 years has proven to be an example of that brands are willing to, in the right circumstances, make that commitment and bring their suppliers with them, because this is a global industry. So I agree. I think we need to think about how to get this information out there, and then how to help bring potential partners together.
Okay, thank you. We are coming now to the close. Are there any last minute questions from the audience? Because that is now your last chance.
Yes, we do have 3 hands raised. Yeah, but I unfortunately don't think we have time to address that. Pardon?
I was just saying I have a comment on this investment in Africa. This is Usman from ICAC.
Please.
Yeah. Matthews, actually, I'll take Navdeep comments further, and this is very much right. To attract investment, both FDI and the domestic, they have to come up, the governments has to come up with a plan. And for that plan, if you see Bangladesh, they come up with the textiles policy, the Indians come up with the textiles policy, the Pakistani government comes up with a textiles policy. So they have to give a whole package, because it is, Julia rightly said, this is a global word, it's a global sourcing. So if you have to provide something to their clients, and for that purpose, if there's a policy available and the support provided by the government is properly chopped out, it will bring a lot of investment to Africa, because we discussed earlier that they have this AGWA, GSP+, EPAs are also coming in. So, this is one side is completed. They have this market access. Now they have to have, all the pieces there, that for pre-shipment credit, post-shipment credit, and in case of Bangladesh, their tariff rationalization program is very good. They have very good temporary import schemes, which you can also call as inbound schemes. So, it's all blend which attracts investment. So the government should be encouraged to formulate their particular specific policies to attract investment in textiles. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Usman. I think that is 18:20 now. I think we have to close. This session both sessions were recorded. So we'll put this on the ITC website. I'm sure the WTO will also put it on their website. If we had presentations from the audience, this will also be shared and will be put on the websites, on the respective websites. So you can also refer to this. If you have other questions that you couldn't ask, or that comes to you later, you can also drop us a mail, and we'll try to connect you with either try to answer or connect you with the speakers that might be more suitable of answering this question. Before closing, I would also, of course, thank the WTO interpreters for their great work. I mean, it was mainly done in English, but we had audience also in Latin America and in Francophone Africa. So thank you very much for the translation, and thank you to all our speakers for the great insights. I think we had a very interesting discussion in both panels, and raised lots of challenges, but also provided some thoughts, food for thought, or where the potential solutions could look like, including communicating more on the possibility of sustainability in Africa. So with this one, I would like to thank everybody. Have a nice evening if you are in Europe or Africa. Have a nice day if you are in the Western Hemisphere. And have a good night if you are in Asia. Bye-bye.